I just wanted to check in from FEMA Region 5. Or as the Hunger Games put it, I would be in District 3, locked down in District 3. And I chose this graphic on purpose because it was made by Ancestry.com. They were just trying to be interesting and relevant. But Ancestry.com and 23andMe, all of these agencies play into this video that we are getting ready to kick off right now. So let's step back out of the movies and the predictive programming and get back to reality. In reality, these are the regions. These are the FEMA regions. So everybody, if you're watching this channel, you know all about it. But this is real. As you can see, it's straight from the Department of Homeland Security website. So they have broken the United States of America, our union of states, up into regions that they can manage more easily. Apparently, my new leader or my FEMA liaison is Troy Christensen, which means something in this area because they have begun buying hotels right down the road from me. They purchased a Drury Inn, or they rented all the rooms out for the next 6 months, and they have begun moving in infected people from outside of our area right down the road here from me. So FEMA's doing that. Here's just a tiny glimpse of a small local newspaper that covered it April 15th of 2020. And it just explains how our emergency management here in Illinois is being reimbursed by the Federal Emergency Management Association to throw up these little quarantine camps in these small towns. And I know that they are doing the exact same thing out in Washington State, that they were buying hotels to quarantine people in, and the sheriff there said that he wanted armed guards posted. Most of you have probably already heard of that. It was mainstream news back in March. They did this right off the bat. Seattle area officials buy a $4 million quarantine motel. This is the picture of it with the gates around it. But it makes me wonder, of course, everybody heard about this. This is on ABC News and all of the mainstream news. But when FEMA started working with these civilian emergency response teams to buy hotels or rent hotels out in small towns, I mean, I come from a really small town. We're a rural area. We had basically no infection, just a handful. Just real quick to show everybody I'm not making this up because they're pretty picky about these videos. So this is the map straight from the government website here in Illinois, and we're down here in southern Illinois where you can see there's a big gap in deaths. So what they're doing down here in rural southern Illinois is they're moving people from infected areas into the uninfected areas. So again, just to be very specific, updated as of today, April 20th at 1:59 p.m. We'll go into those counties and show you that we haven't had any deaths. So the hotel that I'm speaking about, and I'm sure there are plenty more we don't know about, but the one here right down the road from me is in Mount Vernon, is in Jefferson County, and they've had 0 deaths. And that's a much bigger city than all of these filter towns around it, but still 0 deaths. And then we have Marion County, 0 deaths, and Clinton County at 0 deaths. So the point is, none of the counties down here around where they're moving all of the infected people into these quarantine camps, these quarantine hotels, we've all been very effective at, containing the spread of it. So what they're doing is they're moving them into these rural areas. I had better interrupt right here and just say up front that I am not a medical doctor. I'm not claiming to give any medical advice. This isn't intended to treat or diagnose anything. In fact, the purpose of this video is more to discuss the players that we have seen take center stage in the world around us through this outbreak. So I will be mentioning the coronavirus and stuff like that, my opinions on it. Everything in this video is just my opinion. I'm not claiming to be any sort of expert or news agency or anything. I just want to vlog about it. And please don't jump to any conclusions about what I believe or don't believe about this virus, what I think it may or may not be. I understand completely that there are a lot of people in the truth community that do not believe there is a virus at all, and I understand where they're coming from. But if you've watched my channel over the last several years, and especially in recent months before this pandemic broke out, then you would know that, of course, I do believe in viruses, but I believe that there is a subset of molecular nanomachines. And when we say molecular, like I've laid out in the other videos, that's not exclusive of what we would call biological, because they are using proteins, patented proteins and molecules to create nanomachines, molecular nanomachines, which you might argue would be indistinguishable from any virus because they are made of proteins and amino acids and a typical molecular delivery system. But we have ample evidence, which I'm going to show you from Rice University, and I've put in past videos, that it's very common now that they have created these molecular nanomachine delivery systems to penetrate cell walls and implant RNA or DNA and that type of thing for therapeutic reasons. Using hollowed out viruses like adenoviruses and stuff has been very common gene therapy for a while. So when I use the term infection and things like that, or virus, I'm not denying that there is a virus. I'm also not disputing all of the anomalies that people are citing when they say, well, this can't be a virus because viruses don't behave this way. So I'm gonna discuss all of that with the science, with the clips from the universities and the electron microscopes, and see if we can make some sense out of this. Because as always, like I point out, I really believe we are all saying the same thing, but we're missing some of the pieces of the puzzle. And I believe that this nanotechnology, these nanomachines, are that missing piece of the puzzle. So please stick around toward the end of the video, at least an hour or so into this video. I will get deep into the nanotechnology and the science, which is kind of picking up from where we left off in the last series about programmable matter and that type of thing. But it's also pertinent to the biggest story in the world right now, which is what we are all going through. And that's not to say that I don't believe that they never let a crisis go to waste. I fully understand what a manufactured crisis looks like, what controlled demolition of an entire world economy looks like, what controlled demolition of the Constitution of the United States looks like. I understand all of it, and we'll go through it right now. And so I'm going to start out the first half of the video talking about the major players in this scenario, like Bill Gates, Fauci, Birx, the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, the CDC, FEMA, and the Walmart connection, which I talked about here in my Coronavirus 2.0 video. Toward the end of that, I went deep into Walmart's connections with FEMA and this whole situation. I'm sure that section got lost to a lot of people who didn't stick around for the whole video, but it's really one of the most important and interesting parts of that video. So I encourage you to at least go back and listen to that section. Here's the timestamp, around 2 hours and 30. This is a couple minutes into it. So I would probably go to 2 hours and 28 minutes, and you'll get to this part about Sam Walton and his intelligence agency connections. And starting back, I think around 2001, when Walmart developed their disaster response team with all of these units and this distribution network and all of this type of thing. All of that information is foundational to what I'm going to be talking about here. So if you're not privy to it, you can go, like I said, it's only probably that clip. You can see it's right at the end. It's probably only 10 minutes of information. It's worth a watch, because as you dig into this, it really is all connected. It's none of these videos that we've done that seem completely irrelevant in this situation. They're not irrelevant. It is all connected. In fact, in this LinkedIn Hive Mind, AI, virtual reality, and DMT dimensions, the programmable matter, the black goo video, I specifically mentioned Rice University with this nanotechnology. So many of you remember this familiar image from that video when I was citing Rice University's work with nanomachines, and this was long before the pandemic. You can go and check the dates on the video, that I wasn't discussing this in the context of the coronavirus or anything like that at all. But as it turns out, coincidence of all coincidences, while researching this situation, it is Rice University who has been working with Bill Gates and his foundation on this quantum dot tattoo that also holds the vaccination record. So yes, it's all connected. Rice University with the nano machines and the Tesla technology that we were talking about in the last series, they are full on involved in the development of both the vaccine and the record of vaccination that will be carried in your body. And we talk about Bible prophecy in this. It's important to note that this new technology is, you can see, it's not as simple as what people have been talking about in the past when we saw these prototypes of this type of technology, the VeriChip or other radio frequency implants, RFID chips. It's way more advanced than that. If you put a VeriChip in your hand or in your body, you could cut it out if you wanted to. But this technology, this nanotechnology, the quantum dot technology, it dissolves and goes into your bloodstream and throughout your body. So this, once you get this type of identification, this nanotechnology in your body, it's not something that you will be able to remove. In fact, if you go all the way back to when Bill Gates was just a child, at the dawning of the era of computers, and long before Microsoft, long before he was ever involved in vaccines or financing the World Health Organization and all of these other organizations, when he was just a boy, well, I guess not just any boy, part of the Lakeside Programmers, a computer club that he and his friend Paul Allen started at their school, and then were suddenly employed and financed by giants like IBM. Anyway, while working with the Computer Center's PDP-10, Gates was responsible for what was probably the first computer virus. Remember what I always say, words have meanings, words have origins. There's a reason why they call it a virus. And Bill Gates was the first one to create one, a computer virus, which is a program that copies itself into other programs and ruins the data. It's self-replicating. It copies itself. That's why it's called a virus. Just like these nanotechnologies, computerized nanotechnologies that are self-replicating and copy themselves. When we get to the part where I break down the viruses and nanotechnology, you'll see how important this is. A computer virus and a biological virus are essentially the same thing, especially if you can wrap your mind around nanomachines. So anyway, Bill Gates was probably the first person to ever create a self-replicating computer virus. So is it really any wonder that we see a computer guru putting himself in charge of the whole virus and vaccine movement for the whole world? We have been kept in the dark, so we haven't viewed these things as either the same thing or similar. But I'll show you Bill Gates knows they are, because here's a clip from 2017 from the Munich Security Conference where he outright says that this new virus that is coming, that he's been preparing for, will probably be designed on a computer screen. It will literally be computerized, which is exactly what we were talking about in that last video about computerized atoms, this programmable matter. Anyway, if you can't believe us and we're just crazy conspiracy theorists, then listen to the mainstream expert, right? Here's Bill Gates saying it.
We also face a new threat that the next epidemic has a good chance of originating on a computer screen.
The terrorist intent on using genetic engineering to create a synthetic version of the smallpox virus or
a contagious and highly deadly strain of flu.
So my point is, this thing that we're going through right now is not something separate from what we've been talking about all of these years leading up to this. This is the culmination of what we've been talking about. And what we are going through right now as a human civilization, this is not the end. This is a means to an end. But anyway, we will get to all of that in just a minute. Let's jump back to the beginning and talk just for a second about these FEMA hotels and dorms. As it turns out, FEMA isn't just buying hotels and renting them out down the road from me. They're apparently doing it all over the United States. North Carolina to turn 16,500 hotel rooms and dorms into housing for people at risk of COVID-19. Governor Cooper's office said FEMA has approved federal funding for North Carolina to provide housing for people with unstable living conditions. So it's suspicious that the government runs these businesses out of business by closing everything down and not allowing people to travel and all of this, and then they step in and take them over. And the dorms, that raises a question. I know the schools are closed right now, but does this mean they know that they are going to be closed in the fall, that the schools aren't ever going to reopen or aren't going to reopen this year? Because if they're going to be in use again for the children, either through the summer school or fall when college starts back up again, then how can they have leased these out for at least 6 months? And they expect parents to send their children back to dorms that were used as quarantines for infectious disease during a pandemic. Anyway, the point is, this is going on all over our country. FEMA is setting up a massive network of camps. And if you don't think that's any big deal, I want to play this clip for you. This has made the rounds, so I'm sure most of you have already seen it. I grabbed it off of Chico and Debbie's channel. I don't know if they're the original ones who made it. I've seen it mirrored on a lot of channels. But I wanted to mention them anyway and shout out to them. Thank you guys for your hard work. They pass on so much good information. So their link will be below in the description box too. Anyway, this clip is pretty succinct in explaining the amazing, overreaching powers that FEMA actually have when the President of the United States declares a state of emergency and hands over power to them. And I know there was all of the controversy about after that he took the presidential seal off of his podium and now it's back and all of that. And I'm not addressing any of that right here. I'm just addressing the facts. And this is a fact. These executive orders are a fact. It is no small deal when the President of the United States turns the reins over to FEMA.
FEMA has more power than the President of the United States or the Congress. It has the power to suspend laws, move entire populations, arrest and detain citizens without a warrant and hold them without trial. It can seize property, food supplies, transportation systems, and can suspend the Constitution. When a state of emergency is declared, Executive Order 11921 allows the Federal Emergency Preparedness Agency to develop plans to establish control over the mechanisms of production and distribution of energy sources, wages, salaries, credit, and the flow of money in the U.S. financial institution in any undefined national emergency. It also provides that when a state of emergency is declared by the President, Congress cannot review this action for 6 months. Now, with the understanding that after Trump signed the National Emergency Declaration, FEMA took over. Now, this is March 13th, 2020.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
Fast forward to March 19th, 2020, in the FEMA National Response Coordination Center.
Well, Mr. President, Vice President, thank you for being here. Really appreciate your visit to FEMA. I think your visit really, as you indicated last week, by signing the national emergency, has really empowered FEMA,
So as it turns out, yes, it's happening all over, and FEMA's using a multitude of excuses. Some of them are being converted into hospitals, they say, which is odd since all of our hospitals are basically empty right now, and even the 2 military ships on our coastlines are, what did they say, over 90% empty. But FEMA is still systematically taking over all of these properties and converting them into FEMA facilities. This is talking about the Corps of Engineers turning them into hospitals. But in the other clip, I'll put all the links below, in North Carolina, they were talking about some of them were being used to house people who had lost their homes, because so many people have lost their jobs and they're unemployed, and businesses are bankrupted and all of this, so people are losing their homes. And even though they've passed orders saying that people can't be evicted right now and that type of thing, people are already contacting the governments everywhere wanting free housing and free food. They say that people were so unprepared for anything unexpected that they're already, just a few weeks into this, starving and flooding the food banks and completely dependent on the system, unable to self-sustain at all without the government taking care of them.
If there is one image that can clearly show us how this health crisis has become an economic crisis in this country, it is this right here. The Pittsburgh Gazette captured video of hundreds of cards. Some waited 5 hours as volunteers distributed emergency supplies to 1,500 families. And then they ran out.
Out of the 1950s movie or a bad dream, it's just so surreal.
On this day, 7,200 pounds of food was given away from the Chicago Food Depository.
You would think you're back in the 1920s or 30s during the era of the Great Depression.
What we've seen through this COVID-19 crisis is that there are so many more people looking for food assistance right now. It is folks that are maybe from the service industry, from the hospitality industry, and they are seeing themselves being furloughed or out of work potentially for the first time. So for example, our mobile pantry sites, usually we have about 300 households that come, and with these distributions that we've had in the last few weeks, we've had upwards of 1,000 households.
So you probably noticed that in a lot of the food distribution clips in all of those major cities, there were military people involved. In some states, they activated the National Guard for projects like this, food distribution and building these makeshift hospitals, working with FEMA, which is pretty common in all of these disasters. We always see FEMA step in with food distribution. And like I mentioned in that Walmart video earlier, you know that during the Obama administration, Janet Napolitano, the head of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, she initiated that union specifically with Walmart. So they linked FEMA and Walmart to create a food distribution network. And early on, in just a few weeks into the pandemic, it was right around the time that Illinois first got locked down. And I was talking about the rations, how everything was on rations. And I said, welcome to Venezuela. And yeah, some people got up in arms and, oh, how can you say that? And whatever. Well, this is what it looks like. This is what a communist takeover looks like. And their distribution networks, they decide, they distribute. And that's exactly what I experienced. Whether people want to believe it or not, that's up to you. But in the early days of the lockdown here, yes, I went to Walmart and they put us on rations. A Walmart employee literally came up to me and told me to take stuff out of my cart, that there was a limit of 2. That happened to me. 2 items per customer. That's all you get. And even now, they've progressed to the point that they have sort of guards standing at the door of Walmart, and they have all this crime scene tape with the yellow tape blocking off everything. So you can't just go in on your own. You have to go through this canal and you go up to the Walmart employee who mans the door, and they can only allow so many people in the store at one time. And nobody seems to care. We're already well conditioned to accept, guards at the doors of the stores allowing us in. And once we get in, you only get your rations, and all of the small businesses are closed. So if you want food distribution, you go to these mega giants who are allowed to stay open while all of the other businesses are forced to close. So if you don't believe that overnight, the world as we know it could completely change and we could be on rations and food distribution networks and all of that type of thing, then you're just very naive. Hopefully this situation will wake people up to the fact that, yes, they can change us over to a different system in a heartbeat. And we're not there yet. We haven't hit that crisis point. They're predicting a second wave and third wave and this type of thing. So we'll see how this plays out. But I want to make the point, the way our system and government is set up, FEMA absolutely does have the right to take over all of our food supply in an instant, and they will decide what you get to eat and how much you get and when you get it. And we all know they've been putting legislation in place all over the United States and other countries, and they've been raiding organic farms, people who just want to self-sustain and produce for themselves or for their community. They say, no, absolutely not. It has to go through the big food corporations. And now, in addition to that sort of tyranny that's already in place, we have all of these overzealous cops around. Like here, UK cops tell man he can't sit in his own front garden due to the government's COVID-19 lockdown. So there seems to be some sort of mental disconnect that it's not just isolation from other people, social distancing. How can you catch or spread the virus sitting in your own yard? Or there's been instances of people sitting on a park bench by themselves with nobody, not that nobody's within 6 feet of them, nobody's within 100 feet of them. But there's some sort of mental disconnect that this lockdown means that you must be completely isolated in solitary confinement. Not just house arrest isn't good enough. You have to be in solitary confinement. And it makes no sense. Scientifically, it makes no sense. How can a man sitting in his own front yard? And we've seen a lot of that. A lot of people saying, no, you need to go in your house. Like how can that hurt if you're outside in your own yard? But we've seen that with officials. But it's understandable if you understand the bigger picture and the hidden agenda. Because isolation is the #1 technique that cults use to mind control. Because this shadow government who orchestrates this type of thing, whether you call it the cabal or the deep state or whatever, they're a cult. They use cult practices to brainwash us and make us into their own image, to accept all of their occult stuff, whether it's the New Age religion or whether it's the trans agenda, whether it's their sexual tastes, all of it. They put all of it onto all of the nations of the world. And this is the perfect example right now. It's because it's so hard to believe that a cult could take over the world. We think about Scientology infiltrating stuff and that type of thing, but there is a literal cult that has infiltrated every nation. And you can see that clearly right now because this is a worldwide lockdown. And hopefully this wakes people up to the fact that, yes, this shadow government, this cult can control all of the nations at once. They're locked down in China. They're locked down in Italy. They're locked down in Australia. We're locked down in the United States. They can launch operations this big. And they use these MK Ultra mind control psyops. And what we're going through right now, isolation, this is Cult 101, cult isolation. Just type it in. Everybody knows this is Cult 101. Cult isolation techniques. The cult leader tries to control the flow of information. Gosh, does that sound like anything we've seen on social media or Twitter or Facebook or anywhere? Yeah, the cult leader tries to control the flow of information between his followers. Cults cut off members from the outside world and even from each other to produce intense confusion, loss of perspective, and a distorted sense of reality. Isolation to facilitate abuse, separation from family and community, taking control of the handling of the victim's resources. This is what we're talking about, these distribution networks. Physical isolation, creating dependency. I mean, this is Cult 101. They're making us dependent on the government by bankrupting us, closing down all of our businesses. They're taking control of the handling of our resources. They are separating us from family and community with physical isolation. When are people going to wake up? This is a cult. These are cult tactics. This is MK Ultra psychological trauma. They're doing it on a mass scale like we have never seen. This is the hugest operation, deep state operation, we have ever seen, anyone has ever seen on a worldwide scale. cult isolation techniques. And some of these players are just ruthless with traumatizing their citizens. You know, the Michigan governor, she's experienced such a backlash that they've launched petitions to have her removed from office because she decided that people should not be allowed to be around their own families. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is facing backlash following an expansion to her state's stay-at-home order that prohibits not just public gatherings, but private ones as well, regardless of size or family ties. So this monster right here believes that right now in this time of pandemic and all of this national stress, that the people who live in her state, who elected her, allegedly, that those people should not be allowed to even see their families. They should have absolutely no emotional or family support at all during this. Total isolation. Her order also says that people can't leave the city to go to rural areas, like say to their vacation homes. So that just proves that this has nothing to do with science and it has nothing to do with quarantine. Because if it's less stressful for people to be in their vacation home out in the country to isolate and quarantine, what difference does that make to her? If they're in quarantine, you can stay in your own house on your own property and choose which place you want to shelter in place at. But she says no. No, she chooses where you get to shelter in place. So you cannot go to that home. You'll stay in this home. So that you can see, this is about control, because a decision like that obviously is not based on science or quarantine or anything. It's just total control and making the situation more stressful, as stressful and traumatic, trauma-based mind control and traumatic on people as she can. And you know, her monstrous orders aren't even as far-reaching as the World Health Organization recommends. Here's a clip, I'll play you a clip right now of the World Health Organization announcing that they need to be able to forcibly come in and break up families. At least she only prohibits private gatherings among persons not part of a single household. But the World Health Organization says, no, they need to, even if you are a family in a household, a mom, a dad, and 3 kids, that they need to forcibly come into those households and break families up to stop the spread of coronavirus. Because if we live in family units in homes together, then we can spread it to one another. So they need to take our children away and all sorts of stuff. This is what the World Health Organization is saying publicly.
Last week, Dr. Michael Ryan, he's a leader at the World Health Organization, announced that in response to the spread of this virus, authorities may have to enter people's homes and remove family members, presumably by force.
In most parts of the world, due to lockdown, most of the transmission that's actually happening in many countries now is happening in the household, at family level. In some senses, transmission has been taken off the streets and pushed back into family units. Now we need to go and look in families to find those people who may be sick and remove them and isolate them in a safe and dignified manner.
So now it's starting to make a little more sense why they need all of these quarantine motels. In fact, this one that Washington State bought for $4 million, they didn't rent it, they bought it outright. And they said verbatim that that's what they would use it for, because there were families that needed to quarantine, say, one member of the family, and they couldn't stay in the household, so they would need a place to put those people. So this isn't a stretch of the imagination or a conspiracy theory that this is what they would use these FEMA quarantine camps for. They said that's what they said they wanted to use some of them for. And this was way back in the beginning, before like my state even locked down. They went straight out of the gate really early on and started setting up this infrastructure long before even the World Health Organization had the public press conference saying that that's what they wanted to do, was go in and forcibly break up families.
The latest steps to turn hotels and other spaces into housing for those in need are part of an effort to be able to quarantine people with no place to go if needed. The state says FEMA will cover most of the costs of housing people under the program. Some of those costs include laundry, food, cleaning, and security.
Yeah, security. They'll provide security, all right. That's a bit of a euphemism for armed guards and military. There's tons of stories. Just search it. Inside the hotel rooms are basic supplies and groceries, but outside are armed guards, including both police and army forces, to ensure nobody breaks the strict quarantine rules. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? But that's what's going on all around the world. I'm not just talking about these cases in the United States. Here's Bethlehem. Armed forces are being used to keep the hotel under quarantine. 13 Americans held in that hotel against their will, trying to get out. Here's Canadians trapped in a Peruvian hotel. Quote, there's actually guards on the door. The 71-year-old is now holed up in a small room at a hotel, yada, yada, yada. And we saw something similar with the cruise ships, that people were going crazy. They were desperate to get on land and be free, even if that was in quarantine. They would go to their homes in quarantine, but they were essentially kidnapped and held hostage against their will. And that's a hotel on water, but you get the point, that when they say they provide security, those armed guards usually aren't defending the people being held against their will. They're almost exclusively being used by the government to help the government hold people against their will. Over all these years, people are talking about, oh, this abandoned prison out in the middle of nowhere, it's a FEMA camp. And now it's like, hey, look in your backyard. FEMA's building FEMA quarantine camps everywhere, everywhere, aggressively right now, out in the open. It's on the news. Which is it? Are the hospital facilities we already have, like the hospital ships, are they overflowing? So FEMA needs to build more hospitals? Or are they sitting 90% empty and they've already made public press releases saying that I guess we didn't need them? Yeah, here it is. Even the mainstream media, CNBC, admits now that 90% of the Navy ship is empty. During a White House briefing Friday, President Donald Trump said the lack of patience on the ship showed that New York was healing. They didn't need it. That's a good thing. That's such a good thing. I think that shows that New York's making progress, Trump said. But I mean, it also shows that they didn't need it. That all of the hype and all of the statistics and projections and the flatten the curve charts and everything were so far off. Their projections were so far off that, to me, there's only a couple of options. Either the people that they declared experts are completely incompetent and they're not capable of creating models or projections or understanding, or this was phase one, which was the live exercise.
This is not about retribution. This matters going forward. We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We need to make sure that we're in a live exercise here to get this right. We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We're
just like Pompeo said, and this will allow them to get the tenets in place for when this event goes live. And we're going to talk about an international company called Serco here in a minute. This shows that these type of enormous exercises, drills, like we saw with Jade Helm, well, just like that covered several states, there are agencies and companies like Serco that run worldwide international drills. And don't get me wrong, that is not to say that people haven't perished from a multitude of viruses during this era, during these last several months. I absolutely believe that viruses exist, and I think it's terrible. It's terribly sad when anybody loses their life or loses a loved one. I've experienced it, and you can't put words to it when someone is removed from this world and you don't get to see them anymore. It's horrible. And I would never, ever want to belittle anybody's pain or anybody's grief. But just because there are these nano organisms in the world, that doesn't exclude the possibility that agencies like Serco are in the world. They exist. It's a fact. It's not a theory. They exist. They're traded on the stock exchange. Everybody knows about it. And there's absolutely no doubt, none, zero doubt, that Bill Gates knows all about Serco because he bought stock in it right before the Event 201 exercise, where at the Event 201 exercise, they said they needed a larger simulation, which isn't a shock at all because Bill Gates has been calling for these worldwide and nationwide simulations for a long time, at least since 2015. We don't have to make any suppositions about what he would want. He says it publicly that he believes entire countries should launch simulations that involve everyone from the medical establishment to the government to the military.
And then we need to pair those medical people with the military, taking advantage of the military's ability to move fast, do logistics, and secure areas. We need to do simulations, germ games, not war games. We need to do simulations. We need to do simulations.
So yeah, here's just an article from Bloomberg talking about the Gates Foundation Trust ups stake in a UK prison firm. Now, this makes it even more interesting because Serco, see, the prison firm that they're talking about right here is Serco, the Serco Group. And see, this was just a few months before the Event 201 simulation. The article says the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust increased its stake in one of the UK's largest for-profit prison operators. So not only does Serco put on these live action exercises, these drills, but they also operate prisons. And get this, they specialize in the ankle tags, the ankle monitors that they use for house arrest on prisoners. And they are also using now in the United States to forcibly quarantine people in their homes on house arrest for testing positive or coming into contact even with coronavirus patients. Right here, you can look it up. In April, this is April 1st, COVID-19 Kentucky update, judges order ankle monitor for coronavirus patients refusing quarantine. Anyway, right before the Event 201 simulation and right before the actual outbreak, which was approximately the same time, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation increased their stock in this prison firm, Serco, who also runs mass simulations and also runs large sections of the government electronic tagging for criminals. In fact, they've been in a lot of trouble, legal trouble, for overcharging the government for these electronic tagging of criminals. The company has had its run-ins with the government. A Serco unit earlier this month agreed to pay £19.2 million to settle a 6-year probe into false accounting related to overcharging for electronic tagging of criminals. So they initially bought stock in 2014 after they sold off stock in the G4S, which was another prison security services provider, which drew criticism for its contracts with the Israeli prison system. So when that came under fire, they sold off their G4S stock and they bought stock in Serco, who does the electronic tagging in UK, and got 2 of the biggest contracts from the United States government, one under the Clinton administration and one under the Obama administration, which I'll show you in just a minute. But anyway, Serco, the Gates Foundation acquired an initial stake of more than 600,000 Serco shares in 2014. And then the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust added nearly 200,000 shares of Serco in May, according to the data compiled by Bloomberg. That took its holding to 3.74 million shares, worth about £5.3 million. David Hawkins and Jason Goodman did a series on Serco that is really awesome. I'll put their links below. I haven't mentioned everybody's names so far, but I'm going to be using, I think I've used clips from Truthstream Media and Really Graceful so far, and now David Hawkins and Jason Goodman. I know I'll also be using at least one from Gons over at Face Like the Sun, and of course a couple documents from Richie, an interview from the Next News Network. I'll try to always mention them as I go, but please forgive me if they're just small minute clips or something, and I don't mention the name every single time. All of the links will always be below in the description box under credits. Please do go and subscribe to all of these people. We have to build our network now. Anyway, this is a screenshot from Crowdsource the Truth during their Serco series, and this is straight from the Serco website talking about the simulations that they do and the media support. So Serco says that they do these live simulation exercises designed with the client, and we know Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation actually owns stock in this, designed with the client to meet their requirements with a wide variety of options, including real communication systems and advanced computer simulation. In addition, media play can also be added to the simulation in the form of news injections and the provision of experienced journalists and television crews to help test procedures and also assist in training key staff. So they're talking about propaganda, that this international company can use news injections to control the simulation. And they can provide experienced journalists and television crews who work with their little actor-based reality, just like Shakespeare told us, all the world's a stage. This is what the whole crisis actor thing that everybody's talking about during all of these events. These are the types of companies that run these events. It's real. You can go to their site. I'll put the link to this down below. You can go to their site and you can read all of this directly from their site for yourself. Here's the gold standard from their website. Gold standard is a mixture of people, technologies, and procedures brought together to work as a complete system that fits around the decision-making team. It provides the multi-agency training necessary to promote effective management of emergencies. Our experience has shown that it is vital for leaders and supporting staff to experience real-time exercises. This is what I was talking about, like Jade Helm. They believe that they need to run real-time exercises in realistic and pressurized, have we all been under pressure? Has the whole system been under pressure? But safe environments. They talk about how the intensity and complexity can be adjusted to suit the training in real time. You can put the pressure on, you can lift the pressure off. Okay, before I forget on this Serco, S-E-R-C-O, Serco, Bill Clinton, during his administration, outsourced the processing of U.S. visas to Serco. They control so much. Yes, they issue United States visas now. Serco does. In fact, they were the ones who issued the 9/11 hijackers their visas. Did you know that? And then again, during the Obama administration, they outsourced the United States Patent Office work to Serco. And what I just said there is no small deal. I don't have time to go into it in this video. It would take a whole series of another 10 or 12 videos to discuss it. But if you want to go down that rabbit hole, just type it in. Type in Clinton administration, Serco, and you can get some information on it. But it ties into everything from Hillary Clinton's secret server to Uranium One to Mueller to all of it. They're building patent pools. You can just grab a headline from here and see. United States Marine Field McConnell has linked Hillary Clinton's deployment of Serco to build patent pools associated with full authority digital engine controls, FADEC, to the E Division Data Fusion Center in British Columbia. Serco was involved when Hillary Clinton's private email servers uncovered in negligent handling of very sensitive classified information that was placed on several unsecured servers between 2009 and 2013 when Clinton was Secretary of State. This one is about Serco's involvement in Uranium One. And this one, going all the way back to 1994, talks about them forming a radio patent monopoly and how they set up a resilient backdoor into the Defense Red Switch network to help Hillary Clinton and her female aides override, stand down, the appropriate response of the National Command Authority to attacks both domestic and foreign. So this is what we've been talking about for years. This is what we're working up to. This event called the Black Awakening. Now, like I said, I believe that this is phase one. We are still in phase one, the first wave, but they have told us to our faces, the second wave is coming. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. They are telling us it's coming. We know it's coming. And we call this the Black Awakening, this instantaneous, overnight, worldwide lockdown where the Constitution of the United States and all the governments of the world are basically shredded in an instant. And we wake up to a new world order, if you will. I did a whole video on it right here. This is a 4-hour presentation called The Black Awakening, Super Soldiers, Forbidden History, Rosemary's Baby, and the Clone Wars, I think is what it's called. But it's very interesting. It's this one with the thumbnail of the Gothic cathedrals, because you can trace this all the way back to the East Germanic Goths and their infiltration of everything. It goes all the way through the Middle Ages, right up into the 1700s, where we saw the creation of the Illuminati in Bavaria. In all of the series that I've been posting over the last year, I've tried to trace that all the way through, because a lot of people think that it started in 1776 in Bavaria, but it didn't start there. That was just a continuation, and you can go back through and you can see where the East Germanic Goths took over everything. That's where we get Gothic architecture and all of these demons and gargoyles and witches and stuff that we still see on all of these Gothic cathedrals. Anyway, the Black Awakening, and it's the reason we call it the Black Awakening is because Russ Dizdar has been working with people who have come forward as whistleblowers from these family lines and from these SRA and the trauma-based mind control programs. And he noticed as they went through therapy, these people to recover, again and again, they revealed this one event that they said they have been trained for their whole lives. And they call it the Black Awakening. And it's the ambush, very similar to what I believe we are going through right now in a simulation, or the drill form, or phase one, or the first wave, whatever you want to call it. They've shown us their hand. Now we can see how everything can change overnight. That we're not in a political battle to, pass legislation and we have to overturn this and we have to defend the Second Amendment. We can see that overnight, just like during Hurricane Katrina, they disarmed people. They didn't have to pass legislation or repeal an amendment or anything. They just won mayors like, yeah, go get their guns. And the military guys went out and did it. Innocent citizens. Instead of citizens breaking the law, we had the soldiers and the police breaking the Constitution and the law and doing whatever the cabal said. Unwittingly, granted, I'll give you that. They're not thinking ahead. They were trained to just obey orders. But this is the time for critical thinking. You guys, critical thinking. We have brains of our own. They are not our brains, and we are the body of the cabal. No, we belong to Christ Jesus. We have a mind of our own, the mind of Christ. But anyway, this is the antithesis to us, the anti-Christ. As we are going through our great awakening and God is raising us up and waking us up and revealing all of these things that have been hidden from us our whole lives, they are having their counterpart, the Black Awakening, which is the total fascist takeover, the communist overthrow of the entire world system, creating a one world government called the New World Order, where they dictate. We don't get a vote. We don't get a say. They dictate what we can and can't do. They just say one day, get in your home, shut your door. You are now on house arrest, and it's done. We are. And if we disobey, we get arrested. And you don't believe that's happening, then you need to find an alternative news source. Now, I know there are lots of wonderful police officers and military people, but this is your call to wake up. This is it. You need to ask yourself, how far will you go?
If you work in law enforcement, I have a very important question for you, one which soon may be a matter of life or death. I'm sure some people become police officers just so they can boss other people around, but I'm going to assume here that you mean well, that you want to be one of the good guys. In which case, my question is this. Is there anything the politicians could enact into law that you wouldn't enforce? Is there any order that you would refuse to carry out? Or will you do absolutely anything your bosses tell you to? In the U.S., police have already obeyed orders to fine or arrest people for a wide variety of harmless activities, such as dancing at the Jefferson Memorial or having a vegetable garden in their front yard. For decades, police have been carrying out armed home invasions, forced property confiscations, and other acts of violence against people who weren't hurting anyone, but who engaged in behaviors or habits which lawmakers have arbitrarily declared to be illegal. You may be comfortable in assuming that you'll never receive an order to do something truly immoral, but the fact is, with every order you receive, you have a choice between obeying without question or relying on your conscience. No doubt there were cops a few years ago who never expected to be ordered to disarm innocent people, to do door-to-door home searches without warrant or probable cause, or to detain and interrogate people for merely driving down a road. Yet police have since been ordered to do all of these things, and almost without exception they obeyed. So it's not unreasonable to ask, is there any point at which you will draw a line and say, no, that I will not do? And if you won't draw such a line anywhere, if you will do absolutely anything your political masters tell you to, how are you any different from the enforcers of Soviet Russia, Red China, or Nazi Germany? You may be tempted to say, I don't make the law, I just enforce it. Or to argue that if some legislature, court, or some authority above you says it's okay, then it must be. But keep in mind that this is exactly what the thugs of every tyrannical regime in history said to justify their actions. And how do we remember those people now? As courageous, noble law enforcers? No. Unless you want posterity remembering you as a heartless, mindless pawn of oppression, then you'd better decide, and decide now, where you will draw that line.
You know, when the Nazis went to the Nuremberg trials after World War II, every single one of them said that. We were just following orders. We were just following orders. And they weren't found innocent. They were found guilty, because anybody with a conscience knows that if some socialist dictator tells you to abuse and beat and arrest innocent citizens, your neighbors, you don't do that. You don't follow orders. Just because a serial killer tells you to do something, you don't do it. But we're seeing that right now. We're seeing that across our nation, that the police and the military and the National Guard and people activated, they are so brainwashed by the mainstream, they don't even realize. They don't even realize they're just following orders. Remember this case last week where like 6 cops felt the need to assault a guy for not wearing a mask? A healthy man, not an infected man who had coronavirus, who was supposed to be in his house. Just a guy trying to ride the bus whose scarf wasn't wrapped around his face like Sharia law or something. And these incredibly fascist acts have become widespread, at least across our country. We have leftist politicians having people arrested for dissenting, just for disagreeing with them peacefully disagreeing with them. We have other extremist politicians, KGB style, paying people to snitch on their neighbors. Teaching people to turn on their neighbors in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. Instead of telling us this is the time we need to come together as a nation to survive this and creating unity, no, they're saying you need to turn on your neighbors. You need to turn people in if you see them breaking any of my rules. And keep in mind, these aren't laws that went through Congress. The legislative branch is the one who makes laws. These are all just orders signed by dictators. These governors are just like, yeah, I think I'll close down the whole state. Okay, done. So this is what's going on.
So given all of this, it's not surprising and it's not unreasonable that some people would like to loosen the lockdowns. We've flattened the curve. Let's figure out how to resume our lives. That does not sound crazy because it's not crazy, unless you're the people in charge or their bodyguards in the media, in which case opinions like that are a dangerous threat to your power and must be stamped out immediately. Until recently, for example, some citizens have been using social media, Facebook, to organize demonstrations against the severe lockdowns they're currently living under. Expressing your views about the decisions that politicians make is protected under our Constitution. You could argue, in fact, it's the whole reason we have a Constitution in the first place. It's literally enshrined in the First Amendment, and for a reason. But Facebook doesn't care. Facebook doesn't recognize the U.S. Constitution. It doesn't recognize our country's centuries-old norms. As CEO Mark Zuckerberg explained on ABC, people who complain about the lockdown and organize others to do the same have been removed from the site for providing, quote, misinformation.
How do you deal with the fact that Facebook is now being used to organize a lot of these protests to defy social distancing, defy the social distancing guidelines in states? Is somebody trying to organize something like that, does that qualify as harmful information?
We do classify that as harmful misinformation, and we take that down.
Misinformation. That's a term that should give you the shivers. It's how totalitarian regimes dismiss views that threaten their power. That's the country we're suddenly living in. The state of New Jersey recently issued criminal charges against a woman called Kim Pagan. Her crime? Organizing a protest against the lockdown. In other words, she criticized the governor of New Jersey, so his employees had her arrested. Are you comfortable with that? Our leaders are comfortable with it. They applaud it. It makes life easier when your critics shut up and go to jail. They like that. In Elizabeth, New Jersey, the mayor there is using unmanned drones to spy on citizens and make certain they obey. That sounds like something they do in China. And they do. In fact, the drones are literally from China. They're made by a Chinese company called DJI. The company has donated them to 22 American states to control unruly voters. Over in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio doesn't seem to have drones just yet. He may, but for now he's got the next best thing. 8 million potential snitches all working for him. De Blasio has ordered his citizens to spy on their neighbors and report their neighbors if they behave in unapproved ways.
And Mayor de Blasio isn't the only one doing that. Democrat mayors all over our country are doing the KGB-style snitches. The Los Angeles mayor, Eric Garcetti, he's paying them to snitch on their neighbors. Yeah, the government is gonna, these aren't even governors, these are just mayors. So you can see it's not just the world government or the United Nations and then the federal government and then the governors of the states, all the way down to the local level. They have their players in place. And yes, of course, Mayor de Blasio is a member of the Democratic Party. And Mayor Garcetti is a member of the Democratic Party. And I know both parties are riddled with corruption. I know that. I get it for sure. But if you cannot admit that there are more operatives for socialism and communism in certain segments of society over other segments of society, and you don't understand how complex the coercion and the bribery and all of the different techniques that they use to accomplish their agenda and set up this infrastructure, if you don't realize that it's more complex than just everybody's in on it except me, well, then you need to go a little deeper because they have specific operatives. They are less than 1% of the population, but they are strategically placed in these major cities. Anyway, the point is, it's not just one mayor. It's not just de Blasio. And here's a clip from Garcetti setting up his KGB-style snitch network.
If you've observed recurring violations of the Safer at Home order, please continue to let us know at coronavirus.lacity.org/business violation. You know the old expression about snitches? Well, in this case, snitches get rewards. We want to thank you for turning folks in and making sure we are all safe.
But don't be deceived. Calling in the jackbooted thugs to report somebody who isn't wearing a mask to report businesses that aren't Walmart and Amazon, that they might be trying to stay alive or something. There's no glory in that. You're not a hero for either turning in your neighbors or for being the Stasi force that comes and drags them off. Like the gentleman on the bus who didn't even break any laws. That wasn't the wearing the mask order didn't come from the government at all. It just came from a company. They wanted people to wear masks. So now just companies can wield the strength of the military and the police force. And of course, because of the outcry, the bus company backed down and said that while SEPTA urges riders to cover their faces, those who refuse will not be barred entry to the system. But backpedaling doesn't change the fact that we just saw some police officers and military people will enforce what even non-officials say. People who aren't even in the government. Just a company says it. Bill Gates says it. Anybody says it. And they will go after the citizens. And I'm sure they rationalize in their mind that they're doing the right thing. But I especially bring this up because I want you to keep this type of situation in mind for later when we talk about the mark of the beast. Because when we talk about this nanotechnology injected into the body, this digital ID that they're wanting to roll out, this is the type of thing that the Bible says. You won't be allowed to partake in society. You won't be allowed to buy or sell. Revelation 13:17, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark. So that's what we expect to see in wave 2 and wave 3. As they start distributing the vaccine, you'll start to see more people say, well, you can't go to the nightclub unless you can prove with your ID that you've either been vaccinated or you have a record that you've had it. So you're immune. So you can't take part in society. You can't go into the Walmart because, oh, that's endangering the lives of those employees. And you can see they've already started rolling out the infrastructure for that, for the reading of these wireless implants that, like the Amazon Go stores, that you just go in and you get your items, you put them in your bag and you walk out. There is no checkout system or anything like that. It's all done through your digital ID. And every item in the store has a quantum dot, has a microchip on it with a RFID signature. So everything is tracked. You feel like you're just walking through shopping freely, but every single thing you do and buy is tracked. So that's what we're saying about, will you be able to buy and sell? Will you even be able to enter a place like this if you're deemed unsafe because you don't have your digital ID? You don't have a record of your vaccination. So keep these things in mind. When we talk about the mark of the beast and this nanotechnology and the digital IDs, it's not just a spiritual thing. People think of the mark of the beast, they think of the old Omen movies, like it's some birthmark on your head that says 666 or something. But that's not at all what the Bible says. The Bible says that it's tied in to commerce, to the economy, and you won't be allowed to buy or sell. And that's why simulations or first waves of real events like this are so important in indoctrinating people to get them used to the new normal, as they say. And once again, this has nothing to do with a conspiracy theory. Here's the Amazon commercial for the Amazon Go. They're proudly talking about setting up this infrastructure with artificial intelligence and machine learning taking over everything. So when we talk about all of this, the nanotechnology infused with the artificial intelligence and the quantum dots, we're not just being sensational or fearmongers or anything. We're just trying to communicate with the masses that just because they put a happy little song behind it, like you can skip into the new world order. It's gonna be wonderful when artificial intelligence tracks everything you do. Just because they say it like that and it comes from a source like Amazon, and we're gonna go into Jeff Bezos and his family and, you know, as one of the major players in this here in a little bit here. But this is why we're out here trying to disseminate this information and show people this technology in a different light. That you can't trust everybody just because they're in the government or just because they're the richest people in the world like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. Does that make them trustworthy? Because they've all been sued and in tons of trouble. I already showed you about Serco settling out of court, but Bill Gates himself, He's been in court for everything from Microsoft and the monopoly and antitrust laws to India. An entire country sued Bill Gates and cut ties with him for vaccines.
Bill is one of the richest people in the world because of the wealth he gained from Microsoft stock. And the stock price appreciation is not taxable until the shares are sold. So he held on to these things for decades, which delayed paying capital gains tax. And to avoid this even further, he donated these shares to the Gates Foundation. So our benevolent and altruistic billionaire over here successfully worked the tax loophole of charitable organizations to enhance his own wealth. If what they say is true and money is power, Bill Gates is one of the most powerful people in the world.
It should be noted Gates is the World Health Organization's second largest donor, period. Second only to the US, but just above the entire United Kingdom. And thus, according to critics, the World Health Organization's priorities have become Gates's priorities.
In fact, Gates has donated more than $2.4 billion into the WHO since 2000. Quote, he is treated like a head of state, not only at the WHO, but also at the G20, remarked a Geneva-based NGO representative, quoted by Politico, who once called Gates one of the most influential men in global health.
And they've been rolling it out and unveiling this with all of this refugee crisis that's been going on. So this entire time you have all these war-torn Middle Eastern countries where people are being forced from their homes and forced to live in other countries. And the first thing that those people have to do when that happens to get food and shelter is they have to enroll in this digital ID program. That's part of it.
Uganda is Africa's largest refugee host country. It has been rolling out a biometric data system with the help of the United Nations. The UN says it's logged 1 million people so far, and urban refugees are still being counted.
There was another article that came out today. Refugees in Ethiopia's camps raise privacy and exclusion concerns over UNHCR's new digital registration. It says, I felt like I was held hostage for food and water. They are forcing people onto this biometric registration system, which is what gives these people access to the services, the aid, and it says here it gives them access to their rights.
So surely you can see where we differ. They believe they grant rights. The technocracy does. They give you the right to eat and to live and to exist. We believe, and the Constitution of the United States of America still reads, that we have unalienable rights that are given to us by our Creator. We believe we are born with the right to life, to freedom, to the pursuit of happiness. We believe just by the very fact of being alive and human and sentient beings that we have rights. We are endowed with rights from our Creator to exist and be free and make choices for ourselves. And that's why they have to overthrow the Constitution of the United States of America. And they've come up with a pretty diabolical plan, wouldn't you say? Because nobody had to repeal anything. They orchestrated a scenario that completely circumvented all three branches, all the checks and balances of everything we had ever established. And they never had to take it before the Supreme Court. They never had to go before Congress to pass legislation. Nothing. Just snapped their fingers. Very diabolical. And most people have fallen right in line, lockstep. So, I mean, this is the defining factor. This is the fork in the road where we all have to choose. Are you going to put your faith in them and they will grant you your rights if you do what they tell you to do? Or are you going to put your faith in God and believe that we have unalienable rights that were given to us by our Creator and that we were born free and we have a right to live free? We are not slaves. Just because Zuckerberg and Gates joined forces in the coronavirus fight, are they your heroes because the mainstream media tells you that these billionaires are going to save you? Could they have ulterior motives? Is it even a possibility? Could the rollout of this technology, this technocracy, could it actually be harmful to humanity?
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store?
Weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI.
And what if we just don't want to? What if we just don't want to live in Jeff Bezos' smart city of the future? What if we don't want that sort of life and we love nature and we don't want to be linked into everything? Will we have the freedom to choose? Or are we going to be forced to take part in society at all? Are we going to be forced to move forward into this LinkedIn, hive mind, implant, digital ID society just to be able to buy food? But anyway, let's finish up Serco so we can move on. I got off on a little bit of tangent there. But Serco. There are some undeniable and very creepy similarities between the simulation that Bill Gates partnered to put on called Event 201 and what is playing out around us in quote unquote reality right now. Now, of course, everybody has pointed out, and you've already heard, that they chose the pandemic in the Event 201 simulation to be a coronavirus that caused pneumonia-like lung symptoms. Then directly after, we see our mainstream media announce that there is a coronavirus. And BBC, NBC, all of the mainstream media. So in October of 2019, they run the tabletop simulation at Event 201. Then the very next month, in November of 2019, Communist China comes out in their state-run media and announces that we have a coronavirus in the real world with us. And of course, now we know about all of the connections between all of the main players that we see in our media, their connections with Communist China and the Wuhan labs. We'll talk about Fauci's connection and giving the $3.7 million to the Wuhan lab. We'll talk about Bill Gates' connection and the World Health Organization's connection with Tedros being the Marxist from Africa. Ethiopia was an inroad for the Chinese communists into Africa. They've been fighting to keep the communists from buying up all their land and industries and taking over everything there in Africa.
10 years, this will be a Chinese colony.
10 years, this will be a Chinese colony.
Because you cannot talk of political independence when you have no economic independence. Economic independence is the most important thing. Others follow. And we must empower our people and make sure they are protected. And if we don't protect the local capacity and we allow the Chinese to kill the local capacity, they are quoting laws so that our people cannot compete. So this bill intends to protect the local capacity. We want them to partner with us so that it's technology transfer. We want our engineers to be parts of these projects. They are coming with everything: engineers, surveyors, plant operators, drivers. Why do you need to bring somebody from China to drive a truck? Why do you need to bring somebody from China to drive an excavator? We have plant operators here in thousands who are jobless. Our people have closed down their shops. There's no business. These guys now have come, they are even hawking.
And why is the Chinese taking over Africa?
Those were clips from the people actually living in Africa and Ethiopia and Mozambique, that they have been fighting this, what they call the Chinese invasion. And most of you already know that China has not only bought up trillions of dollars of our national debt, but they have bought up our national parks. They've bought up our movie theaters, or at least I hope you know that, especially if you're still watching Hollywood movies. And you don't know that our entire movie industry and all of the theaters are part of the Chinese state-run media. Here's just a quick article. AMC's deal for Carmichael Cinemas boosts Chinese control of U.S. theaters. AMC Entertainment Holdings, Inc. agreed to buy Carmichael Cinemas, Inc. in a cash deal that would make a Chinese-owned company the largest movie theater operator in the United States. So when we're talking about communist infiltrators and all of that sort of thing, we're not just talking ideologically. We're talking about actual physical ownership of all of they're taking over the world, and nobody seems to care for whatever reason. I mean, I know why, because most of them are oblivious, because all of our media is propaganda run by the communists. How would they know? How would they know? And as you know, it won't be long till they'll have us completely scrubbed from the internet. The censorship is ramping up to the point that it won't be long that there will be no voice besides the voice of the communist propaganda machine. And here's a quick clip from an interview that Jason did with Diana West, who is an author and historian. And one of her books is called The Red Thread, and it talks exactly about this communist infiltration and how it runs through everything. And she traces it back. Actually, even in this interview with Jason, I'll put the link down below, she traces the infiltration of the World Health Organization way back to the late 1940s when it was first instituted. And that it has always had an agenda. I mean, it was created, it's a branch of the United Nations. So to deny that it had the agenda of world government is silliness. But she traces the red thread, the communism in it. But here's a clip specifically about who we're seeing in charge of the World Health Organization today, Dr. Tedros.
I don't mean to just drop these things so quickly, but there's so many of them. But it's interesting to actually plot the map going back, as now we try to figure out why Tedros, Dr. Tedros, he's not actually a medical doctor, by the way.
Right. Is the first person to lead the WHO who is not a medical doctor. Yeah. And there's other problems with Dr. Tedros. And the real question is, why are we selecting a public health minister from Ethiopia, a country that does not seem to be the model of public health? Wouldn't we want to choose a public health official from a country that has very healthy population, lots of hospitals and doctors that are working efficiently and well, so that that person's experience in success can translate to other countries, rather than a country that has debilitating famine and disease, a lack of hospitals and doctors? I mean, how did this guy get in there?
Well, as I understand it, he was very much the candidate of Red China. And I think we have to remember that Africa has been, I think Ethiopia is indeed considered one of the bridges into Africa for China, for Chinese investment, Chinese colonization, if you will, Chinese infrastructure, Chinese aid, all of these things that have been going on in a number of African countries. So I think that is a big piece of this. And indeed, he has remained quite loyal to China. What's disturbing to me is less the China role here, is that when you see American medical establishment being very loyal to Dr. Tedros.
And that truly is the big question, or the big concern, and why we're looking into who Anthony Fauci really is. It's not a secret who Dr. Tedros is. Everybody knows that. So why would these people so willingly be acting on all of the advice, everything he says as if it's truth? Nobody would do that, knowing who this man is and his history and who his connections are and who he actually works for, unless you're working for the same people. I mean, that's my opinion, but I can't think of another reason, because this isn't hidden history, forbidden history, or anything. This is open knowledge history. This clip is from an interview with historian John Martin, and the link will be below because his website is full of information. He's very studied on this subject.
Let's face it, this guy is essentially an African warlord, a petty dictator, a Marxist tyrant who has been involved in a regime that imprisons and tortures political opponents, advocates basically shutting down freedom of speech. And now he sits atop the World Health Organization and has had an unbelievable role in dictating the public policy that has shut down the entire planet. John, what can you tell us about this sinister character?
Well, the key thing to understand about Tedros is that he's one of the highest ranking members inside what used to be probably the worst dictatorship in Africa. And so in the last 20 years, Ethiopia imprisoned more journalists than any other country on the planet. And, well, Tedros had a hand in some of that, which I'll get into later.
Why don't you tell us a bit about the Tigray Liberation Front? A lot of these names.
People's Liberation Front. Yeah.
Give that to us again.
The Tigray People's Liberation Front.
Right. And a lot of these names are going to be complicated for people to remember. So that's part of the reason why we want to go over this. It's important information to people to remember, and hopefully it's going to have an impact on closing down some of these draconian policies before it's too late. I remain hopeful that it is not yet too late. So who exactly are the Tigray, and what is the Tigray People's Liberation Front and Dr. Tedros' role there.
And I'm actually relying on actual journalists in Ethiopia, many of whom have been exiled, who did a lot of this original reporting, specifically.
And isn't it correct, John, that Dr. Tedros and the Tigray People's Liberation Party, they imprisoned journalists like Abibi? They've reported torture, including rape, right?
Yep. Yeah. So I want to make it clear the kind of government that Tedros belonged to, that he was actually, in a sense, the PR man for.
Growing up as a child in the 1980s, I still have very clear memories of the famine that was going on in Ethiopia. And Dr. Tedros was the third in command as the, what was his role? He was the minister?
Well, he was Minister of Health. He was director of the health ministry at a time when the government was orchestrated in a campaign to use the famine as basically a counterinsurgency strategy to deny food and medical assistance for opponents of the government. So this is from a report issued by Human Rights Watch 2005, that they would send the army to villages, and if the people there were found to have voted for or be supportive of an opposition party, they'd be denied food, children would be denied medical treatment if their parents were found to be opposition supporters. And you had gangs that would go to these villages, kill a bunch of people, rape their women. Again, similar reports by Human Rights Watch. And the health ministry that was doing this was being led by Tedros Adhanom.
Mm-hmm. So these aren't hollow accusations. These aren't vague statements. These are very specific actions that have been taken by Tedros Adhanom and the political affiliates he's been aligned with for many years. How did this guy come to be the head of the World Health Organization? Who appoints that position?
It used to be in the World Health Organization that the way the director was appointed was by something called the Executive Committee. And so they were appointed by heads of states, health ministers. And then they changed that in 2015 because it was too secretive. They changed it so that it was the heads of the health ministers that they would directly appoint a leader. And a few weeks before the vote, the African Union unanimously supported Tedros, which guaranteed him about 54 votes, and that pushed him over the line.
Wow.
And so what's important to understand here is that the African Union, the parliament, was built by Chinese companies with the Chinese government's assistance. They're funded by the Chinese government to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And it was found later that the Chinese government actually built in surveillance to the African Union so that they could use political leverage to manipulate them. And China has no qualms about using bribery and manipulation in general in Africa. There's been reports that they even bribed the president of Chad, that they promoted their other candidates in the United Nations by threatening African Union states. And so, to my mind, it's fairly obvious that if they'd wanted to, they could have used their influence in the African Parliament to have guaranteed Tedros the vote.
What's happened with things like the World Health Organization, I mean, it is a joke. We should have nothing to do with it. The bloke who's now in charge of it has disgraced himself at every stage. He was basically selling the Chinese...
It should be noted Gates is the World Health Organization's second largest donor, period. Second only to the US, but just above the entire United Kingdom.
So it actually did, back in January and February, the World Health Organization, but it was actively working against our interests and as a propaganda arm for the Chinese. Absolute disgrace. We should be pulling out of that organization tomorrow and having nothing more to do with it. By all means, let's have a world body that looks after health, but not that one. It's been completely corrupted, much as the United Nations has been completely corrupted.
Okay, I think you pretty much get what I'm trying to say. As far as these players here, the head of the World Health Organization was essentially put in place by China. It's that simple. By the 54 African votes. He's a communist, Marxist, and he was put in place by communist China. He's a puppet of communist China. And beyond Tedros, the World Health Organization itself works for Bill Gates. He's the second largest donor behind the United States, but now the United States has pulled out funding. So Bill Gates essentially owns the World Health Organization. So here's the union. Bill Gates is the financier of the World Health Organization, and Communist China has placed their communist director at the head of the organization. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I haven't even started to get into the backgrounds of most of these players yet. Okay, but back to the Bill Gates simulation Event 201. So we know there's a striking similarity between the tabletop simulation where they said a coronavirus was loosed on the earth, and then almost exactly 1 month later to the day, Communist China and the World Health Organization released the same exact scenario. So we get it. It's just a huge coincidence that in both exercises, it's the coronavirus. I mean, in the simulation and in our quote unquote reality. But I want to show you guys some very specific details that are the same. Here is a clip from Event 201.
Okay, thank you for reconvening, and let's get an update from Dr. Rivers.
In the last 3 weeks, case numbers have continued to grow exponentially. We now have an estimated 4.2 million cases and 240,000 deaths.
Where have I heard that exact number before? Was it in the little simulation or was it in the big one? Oh yeah, it was in both. I'm sure you all remember Dr. Birx up there with Dr. Fauci and this graph with the 240,000 deaths. They just prognosticated that exact number to us in the media 2 weeks ago.
It was their models that created the ability to see what these mitigations could do, how steeply they could depress the curve from that giant blue mountain down to that more stippled area.
And here is the Event 201 fake news broadcast talking about how they need to censor all of us on social media. That according to their models in their simulation of a pandemic, it is of the utmost importance to silence dissent. They discussed in Event 201 all of the options from social media censorship all the way through to a nationwide shutdown of communications and the internet, so that people who are starting to uprise and rebel against the official narrative and the expert recommendations, that to quell that, even if it took shutting off the entire internet to stop people from organizing, then that would be something that would be a necessity. These are the things they discussed in their simulation. So anyway, let's take a look at their simulation of a fake news broadcast during a coronavirus pandemic and juxtapose it against our quote unquote real news broadcasts during a coronavirus pandemic.
We have called this meeting today because of major strategic problems around communication that are happening globally. And here's a media debate that just happened on air today.
Alarming news emerging from social media companies today about the CAPS pandemic. Twitter and Facebook are reporting they've identified and deleted a disturbing number of accounts dedicated to spreading disinformation about the outbreak.
We know social media companies are working around the clock to combat these disinformation campaigns. The task of identifying every bad actor is immense. And experts agree that new disinformation campaigns are being generated every day. This is a huge problem that's going to keep us from ending the pandemic and might even lead to the fall of governments, as we saw in the Arab Spring. If the solution means controlling and reducing access to information, I think it's the right choice.
How do you deal with the fact that Facebook is now being used to organize a lot of these protests to defy social distancing, defy the social distancing guidelines in states? Is somebody trying to organize something like that, does that qualify as harmful information?
We do classify that as harmful misinformation, and we take that down.
And yeah, like I said, I'll put the link below so you can watch the entire Event 201 if you want to. But they also specifically mention fact checkers. And I don't know if you've noticed now, I know Dana Ashley has, but the new thing is videos being removed from all the social media platforms saying that fact checkers took them down. And who are those fact checkers? One of the Facebook fact checkers who says that you can't say anything about vitamin D and you can't talk about any remedies. Anyway, the gal in charge of that whole science department just happens to also be someone who lived in China and worked at the Wuhan lab for, what does she say? I've worked at this exact laboratory at various times for the past 2 years. Small world, isn't it? Whether you believe this is a drill or a simulation, that's up to you. I just wanted to point out a few coincidences. One of the things they say is that they can in real time switch over from a simulation or drill to a live event. That's what they say in their own words on their website. Now I'm just asking you, does that sound like anything we've ever heard before? Like not just 9/11 and the Boston bombings, but internationally, like the Oslo attacks and the 7/7 drills. Sound familiar to what I was just explaining about Serco? I'm just asking a question. That's all I'm doing. I'm not in the know on any of this. I'm not in any intelligence agencies. I don't sleep in the bed with Bill and Melinda Gates. I don't know. All I'm doing is just showing you guys some information, and you know, we'll all have to use our own discernment as we move forward. These are some wild times we're living in, and the only way we can make informed decisions is if we are informed of all of these facts. But unlike the mainstream media and Zuckerberg and all these people who think they need to make all the decisions for you, I trust you guys to take this information and do with it what you will. Okay, so let's keep going with some more information. Actually, the last thing I'm going to say about Serco for right now before we move on is I want to point out about the news injections, that in addition to their simulations, it says that they can add these news injections. And most of you already know, and I know Richie is always trying to make people aware of, and I want to mention it right here, that yes, the Smith-Mundt modernization, that's hard to say, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012, again, during the Obama administration, made it legal to propagandize in the United States. Okay, so the Smith-Mundt Act of 2012, which was contained within the National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2013, Section 1078A, amended the United States Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948 and the Foreign Relations Authorization Act of 1987, allowing for propaganda in the United States, and the Broadcasting Board of Governors to be available within the United States. That means that not just like an acts of war where we go and drop pamphlets in other nations, or on the other side, like Tokyo Rose did to our soldiers. There's always propaganda involved in warfare, but we weren't allowed to use propaganda on our own citizens. But now this makes it perfectly legal to use propaganda on our own citizens. And again, it's undeniable. This isn't just like, oh, fake news, because I don't like them and I disagree with their opinion. I'm talking about the verifiable cases like this one where multiple nations were using the same footage, saying that this is supposedly on March 22nd, supposedly this is in Italy. This is the crisis, coronavirus. There's no more room for patients. And this is the footage they're showing that this is supposed to be the Italian hospitals. And then on March 25th, it's broadcast on CBS this morning saying that there's no more room in the New York hospitals. Every square inch is being used. And you can clearly see there is no chance that this exact thing is actual footage from the hospitals in Italy and from the hospitals in New York, and it matches up perfectly. So this isn't about opinion or politics or any of that. This isn't about conspiracy theory. This is a fact. Propaganda has been used on us through this. Whether you believe that's part of the simulation and the media inserts that Serco talks about, or if it's just happenstance, like I said, I'll leave it up to you. I'm just presenting the facts. And this isn't the only example.
Across the area, healthcare workers face tremendous challenges to treat patients. And right now at Brookdale Hospital in Brooklyn, they are at capacity. CBS 2's Kevin Rincon has a look inside.
Patient beds line the hallways at Brookdale. There's physically no more room as every inch of this building is now being used.
This is the main hospital in Bergamo in Lombardy province. It's one of the most advanced hospitals in Europe.
Once again this morning, the city's hospitals will be on the front lines in this war against the coronavirus. In Elmhurst, Queens, that hospital there, lines of people lining up already this morning for about the last 45 minutes. Confirmed cases, people waiting to get tested. Supplies are in demand there.
With a growing number of patients as supplies dwindle, you can see barricades behind us set up here outside of the hospital to keep order here because so many have been lining up every day to get tested.
Somebody said there will be hordes of people inside, that's why I didn't go in. Let's see, the doctor with his mask on and everything. And look at that. Nobody. Completely empty. There's just police, no EMS. Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely. Ghosts. That's all they got you afraid of, ghosts.
Walk-in healthcare clinics around the state say they've been overwhelmed by the demand for coronavirus testing, causing frustration.
We were overwhelmed yesterday with the response to people wanting testing.
Urgent Care Hawaii says its drive-up service was deluged by requests for coronavirus tests, some waiting as long as 4 hours.
I just want to know why Urgent Care doesn't want me to document. They're lying on the news about being overwhelmed with lines and testing all these people. They're taking state money and they're not testing anyone. So are these the overwhelming lines that you guys have been lying to the people of Hawaii about? I'm a journalist and this is going to be a column that's going to be read nationally. That's great. About how you're lying, that there are massive lines that you're doing.
We were overwhelmed yesterday with the response.
You didn't test 25 people. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I got nobody going in. No.
This guy here from Germany had the cojones. He walked through the whole hospital to show the world it is completely empty. And he did comment that the hospital workers were also very dubious about this whole theory as well.
Das ist alles übertrieben und so. Das, was in den Medien berichtet wird, das können Sie nicht nachvollziehen, dass sich das nicht deckt mit dem, was hier tagtäglich passiert.
Oh, and I thought this was really interesting. For those who don't already realize that there is a CORONA, California, and there is a Corona Regional Medical Center within it. And of the over a dozen hospitals this guy ran around diligently checking out, this one too had zero evidence of lines of people getting tested or evidence of chaos. But what it did have were big signs out front surrounded by orange that said, "Hospital disaster drill in progress."
Okay, so this is the last piece of evidence. There's so much evidence. I could do 10 videos just on that. But this is the last piece of evidence to prove beyond any shadow of a doubt that propaganda is being used on us. And I can't resist throwing in this old clip of Sinclair Media Group, how all of these different news stations were saying the exact same words, not just covering the same stories. They were saying the exact same words. So obviously they were given a script from higher up. But as you can see, all of these news stations that will be reading the exact same propaganda script are all different. ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox News, it doesn't matter. They're all getting orders from the same person somewhere up above. And there were tons of these caught, not just this one script here that I'll be showing you. But this one's especially comical, the irony, because what the script that they're reading is saying that we are all bad. They're demonizing all of us on social media for broadcasting news that isn't coming from them, the official state-run media, you know? So they're calling us fake news and saying that we're a danger to democracy. So you gotta admit, that's just hilarious. It's priceless.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the prevalent trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Okay, so that's enough of that. I think you get the point. So let's finish up on Gates so we can run through Fauci, Birx, and Redfield really quick. People are starting to realize that all of these people making all of these decisions for us and giving us all of this advice for our lives, more than advice, we've been locked down. They're arresting people. They're putting ankle bracelets on people that have committed no crime. So I just want to take a quick look at all of the major players. Do a sort of semi-deep dive, because you don't have to dive very deep to find all of the connections. But we do need to dive deeper than the mainstream media to see who these people are who are playing all of the major roles in this shit show that's being put on around us. And there's a couple of hubs, but they seem to overlap. You know, the old adage, all roads lead to Rome. Well, in this case, all roads lead to Bill Gates, but not just Bill Gates. He was prepared for the role that he's in right now.
Nearly 2,400 years ago in ancient Greece, Plato discussed the importance of population control. Aristotle advocated the use of abortion and infanticide. In 1859, Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species. In it, Darwin only hinted at the implications of human populations, but his cousin, Sir Francis Galton, became obsessed with the idea. In 1883, Galton published Inquiries into Human Faculty and Its Development, wherein he wrote that his intention is to touch on various topics more or less connected with that of the cultivation of race, or, as we might call it, with eugenic. The term comes from the Greek word eugenis, of noble birth.
I'm going to break into this clip really quick here because I just want to point out as we go forward that what we're getting at here is that Bill Gates we've all been taught that he's just this computer nerd that made it big because he was a computer programmer when he was a kid and he got a contract with IBM and it's just because he's so smart and all of that. And that's not at all how it happened. He was born of IBM and a eugenicist. His mother was on the board of IBM, and his father, William Gates, as you can see here with the Rockefellers, was a powerful attorney who also grew up a eugenicist and was on the board of Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood. Here's another picture of Bill Gates Sr. But anyway, the point is, here he is with Soros and Rockefeller and all of the media moguls. This is Madam Astor. So it isn't any coincidence that Bill Gates is all over TED Talks talking about population control and that he's involved in these types of subjects because he was raised by eugenicists who have generational ties to this movement. And in fact, I'm going to quit yapping and let's get back to the clip where you'll see that the founder of IBM had ties to the Nazis, who we all know were hell-bent on creating the master race. That's the very definition of eugenics, going all the way back to ancient times.
In the early 20th century, eugenics became an academic discipline in universities. Organizations were formed and funded to win public support. The Kaiser Wilhelm Institute and the Cold Spring Harbor Institute rejected the idea that all humans are born equal and began selling the idea of cultivating a new master race of noble bloodlines. Planned Parenthood was formed in America by racial eugenics advocate Margaret Sanger. President of IBM, Thomas J. Watson, established a special subsidiary in Poland called Watson Business Machines to assist in the Nazi invasion of Poland. This business continued throughout the war, and IBM managed the entire operation from their headquarters in New York. The Nazis were rightly admonished for war crimes, but not Thomas Watson. He went on to create the IBM World Trade Corporation and passed IBM on to his son. His granddaughter ended up marrying Margaret Sanger's grandson. Bill Gates' father worked on the board for Planned Parenthood, and his mother worked on the corporate board for IBM, who Bill partnered with to create Microsoft. With no medical background, Bill Gates then went on to become the world's foremost pusher of vaccines and population control.
Gates officially denied any connection between his resigning from these boards and the outbreak of coronavirus, which he admitted he was so eager to address.
Vaccines.
Billionaire Bill Gates' philanthropic work is always presented as a wonderful charitable thing for humanity.
I have seen people worship Bill Gates in public, in real life. I've seen it with my own eyeballs. The way that some people worship religious figures is the way that I have seen actual human beings in present reality worship Bill Gates in real life.
God, oh my God, oh my God!
I've seen it for myself, and he knows it too.
You were so nice. It was really special to me because you've been such a big influence on my life. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I've looked up to you like...
Giving away billions of dollars, and people are worshiping him for it.
Despite the fact that Gates never seems to see a drop in his personal net worth no matter how much money he gives away.
This year, for example, he gave away $35 billion and didn't have his personal net worth drop at all. He's making decisions that affect the entire world. No one voted for him. He's got billions of dollars, and it doesn't even change his bottom line in his bank account, okay?
Or that he came into this pandemic with a disproportionate influence over the economy before becoming the person perhaps loudest in championing shutting down the economy during this pandemic, for which he seems to have solutions ready to go.
Vaccine, which is such a key thing.
Or that he's a straight-up dictionary definition of a technocrat in that nobody ever voted for him, and yet the scientific projects he dumps all these billions into affect everyone's lives anyway.
Spending millions and millions of dollars just making decisions and getting together with experts, quote unquote, from elite universities and just doing stuff. They're just doing stuff. If they did this and they told you about it, what are they doing they didn't tell you about? That's the question. And we don't know the answer. Why? Because we live in a technocracy. That is why. This is the rule by, government by, and management of society by technical experts. You may have voted for president, but did you vote for someone to cover the earth in video surveillance satellites so there's nowhere to run? Because that's what he's doing. That's what he does with his money.
The access that used to be available to the middle class or whatever is just rapidly going away. That's a trade-off society is making because of very, very high medical costs and a lack of willingness to say, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers? That's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
That's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, and even Oprah Winfrey to discuss population control. They were portrayed as superheroes.
Behind closed doors on this New York campus, a secret gathering of some of the world's most powerful people. Gates, Buffett, Bloomberg, Winfrey. It was like the Super Friends.
And I've pointed this out before about Oprah Winfrey, how she's open about the master race. Of course, she calls the ruling class the master class and not the master race. I don't know how it escapes the masses, but I don't know. Maybe they don't know world history. I have no idea. But I know in like my trans agenda and breeding program video, and I think my RH negative bloodlines video, and a couple others, I had gone into this in more depth and discussed some of the players, like Jane Fonda, going all the way through the era of the Young Turks and the Laurel Canyon facility, and then being used during the Vietnam War for communist propaganda and that type of thing. And now, of course, she's always on Oprah's Master Class, where Oprah parades all of the ruling class and celebrities in front of us so that they can teach us how to think just like them.
First, we've got population. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
So how does that sentence even make sense? I thought vaccines were supposed to save lives. How can making vaccines available in third world countries lower the population? That should save lives, which would increase the population because they face such famine and poor medical care over there that given these vaccines, they wouldn't have such a high mortality rate. But no, that's not what he said. He said that if we can get these vaccines distributed, we can lower the population by 15%. And I know that's too sinister and too diabolical to even believe that people would do that. But the eugenics movement has done this from the beginning of time. It's just like Margaret Sanger, the Planned Parenthood, before she was the American Birth Control League, before they changed the name to Planned Parenthood, and they were formed by the Population Control Council. And she immediately, read the history, this is reality, she immediately went to the minorities. She went to the African American communities in the United States and started teaching them to abort their children. So when I say things like, have they released a choline virus that, doesn't affect the young, strong, productive children, but it takes out the elderly and the infirm. And now studies are coming out saying that it appears to target specific ethnic groups. Coronavirus warning for people from Black and minority backgrounds, as the NHS data suggests they are more at risk of life-threatening complications. And then it goes on to talk about the studies in the UK. So I had mentioned in the last video about the potential of it being genetically engineered as a euthanasia type. You just heard Bill Gates, right? Him talking about money is better spent to other than give medical care so that people can extend the last 3 months of their life, that maybe that money would be better spent to like pay a teacher's salary or something. Death panels. He said it right out of his own mouth.
And a lack of willingness to say, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers? That's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
So I'm not a crazy conspiracy theorist when I say, could this be a choline or a euthanasia virus? And if not this one, is this the drill? Is this the preparation for what they are developing, what they are going to release? And they want to know how the population is going to respond and how they are going to manage us after they introduce whatever it is they have genetically engineered. So for all of those people who don't believe that this is anything more than just the flu right now, I'm not even disagreeing with that. I don't know. Nobody really knows yet. But it's becoming crystal clear that a second wave is on the way. Will that be the real one? Will that be a mutation of this one? We don't know, but we know something's coming. And they are getting all of their ducks in a row and all of their infrastructure in place for it. And we'll talk more about it targeting DNA groups, genetic lines, ethnic lines, when we get to the part about the nanotechnology and the CRISPR-Cas9. This is real. The CRISPR-Cas9 technology, which is being used in this vaccine, for sure. I will show you the reports from Moderna and the actual vaccine companies, that this is a type of vaccine that has never been used on humans before, the one that Moderna is working on anyway, because it uses a computer code. It uses the RNA code, where you inject the biological, material from a virus, either a dead virus or in some cases even a live virus. Live in air quotes, but you know what I mean. But you inject biological material and then your body has an immune response to that and creates the antibodies. Well, this is completely different. It is using computer programs. It is not using the virus because they have never isolated a virus. Did you know that with this coronavirus? They've never isolated a virus. The tests that they are currently using to test for it, they detect an RNA code. Please look into that and educate yourself if you don't know about that. It's out in the open. Coronavirus testing kits to be developed using new RNA technology how do we test for coronavirus anyway? And it goes through the explanation. The first challenge of sequencing a coronavirus genome is that it's made of RNA rather than DNA, and yada, yada, yada. And they explain it. I'll explain it all later in this series. But for right now, the point is they have never isolated a virus that they're calling a coronavirus. What they are testing for is the presence of this RNA code in people. And likewise, the vaccine will also just be using a code. That is why it only took like a couple of weeks. What'd they say, 41 days to human test trials? That's absurd. But the reason that they were able to manufacture this vaccine so quickly is because they didn't have to isolate a virus and then let that virus self-replicate so that they had biological samples that then they could use to make a vaccine. They skipped all of that. So they just used the RNA code to computerize a vaccine. In fact, I'll just pop in a little clip of a few seconds of this is straight from the official Moderna website. This was their press release about the messenger RNA 1273, Moderna's potential vaccine against COVID-19. For those hard-headed people who can't believe what I'm saying without seeing for themselves. So I'll just pop this little clip in right here so we can suspend disbelief and keep moving and keep learning.
Working together, scientists at the NIH and Moderna identify the sequence for a key protein on the surface of the virus. The instructions for making the spike protein were then encoded into an instruction molecule called mRNA, which could be administered directly to patients as a vaccine. What makes this approach different is that you don't need to make the virus itself to make a vaccine, a time-consuming and intensive process. Instead, you use the information from the virus and administer the information directly to the patient. Essentially, the patient makes their own vaccine. This cuts out the middleman. Using this approach, NIH and Moderna were able to go from sequence to a vaccine ready for human testing in record time, just 42 days.
So that is just one of the vaccines. Bill Gates is funding, I think, seven different vaccines right now. But let's get back to the original point, which was, why would Bill Gates say that this mass distribution of vaccines would lower the population when vaccines are supposed to be created to save lives?
In 2014, the World Health Organization was accused of chemically sterilizing millions of Kenyan women without their consent. They did this with what was said to be a tetanus vaccine. The World Health Organization has since admitted to developing sterility and family planning vaccines for over a decade. Of course, Africa isn't the only place these forced sterilizations have reached. Beyond vaccines, they've even tried to limit fertility by genetically modifying crops, like they did with contraceptive corn. And back when Monsanto was only Monsanto, not Bayer Monsanto, Gates had invested millions and millions of dollars in the company.
Gates has long been warning of a pandemic, and not just in TED Talks.
This equation has four factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services, the energy, and the CO2 being put out. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero.
I've got a little chart. As you can see, X equals the number of New Balances and factories that I could own. P, that's going to equal the slave market there. CO2 is going to stand for the Air Jordan market. And as you can see, Y there, that equals the Depop. And if we put this into a magic machine that I've created, operating system 666, it's going to give us a figure, roughly, if we could get down to those numbers.
Bill Gates was born in 1955 in Seattle, Washington, into a family of affluence and power. His father, William Gates II, measuring 6 feet 7 inches tall.
Okay, now I know this is going to sound superficial to a lot of people and irrelevant, but I'm going to say it anyway. Now, what are the odds that Bill Gates's father is 6'7"? He's a giant of a man. And yet Bill Gates is tiny, petite little guy. He and his wife, Melinda Gates, are like 5 foot tall. So the reason I bring that up is because I've done so many videos on these breeding programs. and the IVF programs in the ruling class, that many, many, many of their children are created in these laboratories through IVF. And it just makes me question. I'm just going to throw it out there. It just makes me question, is that man, William Gates Sr., is he the biological father of Bill Gates? And he could be, sure. I don't have a problem with that. I just wanted to throw it out there that his dad's almost 7 foot tall and he's so petite. Just makes me wonder, is he his biological son, or is he part of this breeding program?
Was an attorney who co-founded Preston Gates and Ellis, a law firm that had offices across the United States and China. As a man highly involved in politics, William Gates holds quite a laundry list of accolades, as he sat on the board of eugenicist Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood before the era of Roe v. Wade. Not only that, but he was also the face of a state income tax initiative in Washington state. After his late wife passed, William Sr. married Mimi Gardner, longtime friend of Teresa Heinz Kerry. Mimi is fluent in Chinese and served as former director of Asian art at the Yale University Art Gallery. But let's get back to the late Mama Gates. Because in addition to popping out Bill Gates, she also had 2 daughters, Christy and Libby. And Mama Gates, who also is known as Mary Maxwell, started off as a humble school teacher and eventually became chairwoman of United Way. She came from a long line of money and power, as her father was a wealthy banker and her grandfather served as president of the National City Bank in Seattle and was the director of the Seattle branch of the Federal Reserve Bank. Anyway, somehow the Lakeside programmers, composed of miners, went on to make business deals with computer corporations during that time, getting paid to find bugs in the software and write computer programs. And his company, Microsoft, took off with the help of his old high school buddy, Paul Allen. In 1980, Microsoft and IBM struck a deal, and the rest was history. 6 years later, Microsoft was launched on the stock exchange, and Bill and his best buddy, Paul, became instant millionaires. Though before his death in 2018, Paul Allen wrote in his memoirs that Bill was a bully who tried to cut Paul's share in the company as Paul was recovering from cancer.
Okay, so I think you caught all of the major takeaways. Bill Gates was born and bred and raised by international bankers. And long before Bill Gates had ties to communist China, his father did, his stepmother, everybody was involved in it. These alliances are generational. And we see that his father was heavily involved in eugenics, which means royal family, right? The royal bloodlines. And his mother was on the corporate board of IBM. And then Bill Gates himself and Microsoft were kicked out onto the market by IBM, who didn't just finance Microsoft, but also financed and built machines for the Nazi regime during World War II. But on top of all those obvious connections, did you catch the fact that his mother's maiden name was Maxwell?
And Mama Gates, who also is known as Mary Maxwell.
Much like Ghislaine Maxwell, or her father, double agent Robert Maxwell, who was actually born Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hock, or something to that effect. Robert Maxwell, a disgraced media mogul who now in hindsight we know was a double agent and died in typical mob hit fashion, like fell off his boat in the middle of the ocean type deal. And it's not just the Maxwell connection that I want to point out here. I think more importantly, I want to point out the Epstein connection, because Bill Gates funded some of Epstein's media and tech projects. Or I guess it's probably closer to the truth to say they're not actually Epstein's projects, but they funnel money through these foundations to the research projects that they want for their infrastructure. And we know that Bill Gates made several donations through Jeffrey Epstein. Like here's one, and you can see these aren't like super secret meetings that leaked out and it's a conspiracy. Look at this. This is Business Insider, New York Times. This is very mainstream. So if these are the ways that Bill Gates funded Jeffrey Epstein publicly, who knows what, about the secret meetings or anything behind closed doors. But I'm not going to sit here and list article after article. You can just search it. Bill Gates made donations to MIT through Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Gates met with Jeffrey Epstein many times despite his past. So make note of that. That was after Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender that Bill Gates had all of these meetings with him. And yes, of course, Bill Gates was one of the names of the people in the flight logs that flew on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express. And of course, we can't forget the DuPont heir that was arrested on Bill and Melinda Gates' personal estate with thousands of child porn images. And it's not just a conspiracy theory. He pled guilty in 2008 to fourth-degree rape of his own daughter. And he was never charged with the crimes against his son.
So let me give you an interesting timeline of recent events. In 2013, Bill flew on the Lolita Express with our favorite notorious Mossad blackmailer who didn't kill himself, Jeffrey Epstein. Through this connection, Bill Gates made donations personally directed by Epstein. In 2014, a man was arrested at Bill's estate for possessing 60,000 photos of children. But apparently this dude got the DuPont heir treatment with a mere slap on the wrist, being ordered to stay away from children.
Actually, if you haven't seen this video that I put up back during the Epstein case, it's called Shocking Jeffrey Epstein Connections You Won't See on the News. And this is what the thumbnail looks like. I will try to remember to put the link to it down below in the description box. But the reason I'd like you to go watch it if you haven't is because in this, I discuss his connections, much like we're doing right here, and especially his technology connections, the contributions and funding through his foundations to all of these different technologies. And it all relates to what we're talking about right now. For example, here's one clip from my video, and this is a Forbes article from 2013. Science funder Jeffrey Epstein launches radical emotional software for the gaming industry. And this talks all about Jeffrey Epstein and the Hong Kong government and his efforts in China and this virtual reality software that they were developing all the way back then. It's really all the same types of technology that Bill Gates is funding, and we see communist China funding for the apps on the phones and all of that type of thing. Here's another one that Jeffrey Epstein's foundation was funding, the sequencing of genomes as pertaining to neuroscience and brain mapping. This is what we'll be talking about when we get to the CRISPR-Cas9 and the nanotechnology about the mark of the beast, the Bible prophecy, where they are inserting, they literally want to change our DNA. And the scary thing is they can do it. CRISPR-Cas9 makes it so like a kindergartner could almost do it. It chemically searches out the snippet of DNA you want to take out and replace. It's amazing technology. And I know that could be used for wonderful medical miracles and gene therapy and all sorts of just amazing, miraculous advancements. But the problem is that there are people who want to weaponize this type of technology. And many of you remember this clip. I've used it over the last several years in different videos when we talk about these subjects. But this is a Department of Defense presentation back in 2005. And this was right in the heat of what they called the war on terror against religious extremists. But in light of everything that we are talking about here now, I just want to point out that there are people who have isolated these genetic codes and think that they are helping humanity by turning off people's brains, certain sections of their brain. And when we're talking about Bible prophecy, see, it's easy for them to turn us against each other. So they say, oh, it's religious fundamentalists when it's Islamic extremists, right? We have to do this. We could use this vaccine on them and it would make them not be religious radicals. But keep in mind, now we are the religious radicals. They think Christians are the religious radicals. And the right-wing conspiracy theorists and the people who are protesting all of these wonderful advancements and stuff. So don't let it escape you that back in 2005, they had already isolated specific gene sequences, and they were talking about turning our brains off, or turning off the brains of select people that they saw as enemies of the state. So when I see the multitudes and multitudes of prophetic dreams and visions from Christians who are being shown glimpses of this, what they call the zombie apocalypse, it's not a joke to me. It's not just a nightmare. These people have for decades been developing vaccines that can turn off parts of our brain. And not just through vaccines. In fact, if you listen to the presentation, they say it can be dispersed through a virus, even if you don't take the vaccine.
Excuse me, on the left over here, we have individuals who are religious fundamentalists, religious fanatics, and this is the expression, RT-PCR, real-time PCR expression of the VMAT2 gene. Over here, we have individuals. So let me complete. So over here, we have individuals who are not particularly fundamentalist, not particularly religious, and you can see there's a much reduced expression of this particular gene, the VMAT2 gene. Another evidence that supports our hypothesis for the development of this approach.
How would you suggest that this is going to be dispersed? Aerosol?
Well, so the present plan and the tests that we've done so far have used respiratory viruses, such as flu or rhinoviruses, and we believe that that's a satisfactory way to get the exposure of the largest part of the population. Most of us, of course, have been exposed to both of those viruses, and we're quite confident that this will be a very successful approach.
By spreading this virus, we're going to eliminate individuals from donning on a bomb vest and going into a market and blowing up the market.
So our hypothesis is that these are fanatical people, that they have overexpression of the VMAT2 gene, and that by vaccinating them against this, we'll eliminate this behavior. So we have some very, very remarkable data in this next slide. Here we have two brain scans. These are fMRIs. These are two different individuals with different levels of expression of VMAT2. On top is an individual who's a religious fanatic, an individual, and we've repeated this numerous times, that has high levels of VMAT2. Now, this individual down here who had low levels of the VMAT2 gene, this individual would self-describe as not particularly religious. In each case, these individuals were read a religious text. This individual lit up the right middle frontal gyrus, shown here, and that's a part of the brain that's associated with theory of mind. It's a part of the brain that has to do with intents and beliefs and desires. In marked contrast, here's an individual who would not particularly self-describe as religious, and when they're read a religious text, what you see is that this part of the brain called the anterior insula lights up. This is a part of the brain that's associated with disgust or displeasure on hearing something. The virus would immunize against this VMAT2 gene, and that would have the effect that you see here, which is it's essentially to turn a fanatic into a normal person. And we think that will have major effects in the Middle East.
But anyway, yeah, so here's one of the Harvard research studies, sequencing of genomes, and in an emerging area of neuroscience that proposes to map brain activity and establish a functional connectome. They want to be able to connect your brain into this AI virtual reality, not through big bulky VR glasses, through snipping genomes and inserting them. A neural implant that they could put in almost without your knowledge. Those are just a handful of the articles that I discussed in this Jeffrey Epstein video where I traced the funding of his foundations. And you can see this is why Bill Gates was funneling money to Jeffrey Epstein. It's about more than just the human trafficking. That's just one small part of what they do. But all you generally hear about when you hear about Jeffrey Epstein is that part. But the more terrifying part are these sciences that he was funneling money to. Billions of dollars donating to all of this scientific research that plays into what we're living through right now. Here's another one. Cognitive artificial intelligence. From artificial intelligence to artificial consciousness. Oh, I'm going to try not to cry. God help us. God help us. Okay. These are exactly the type of things that we have been talking about over this past year, especially here in the programmable matter, that black goo video I was telling you about, and the chemtrails. That one is all about them linking us into this virtual reality, these artificial dimensions. This one too, the one before it. Over 100 stars are missing, skyquakes, artificial dimensions, right there, machine elves and ghosts. So definitely these two we're talking about, the artificial dimensions. Obviously, this shocking Jeffrey Epstein connections you won't see on the news here. This one, A Minute to Midnight, the technocracy endgame. Must see, the scariest reality ever, biohacking the human brain, right here. That one talks about it. Wired, is technology already reading your thoughts? Wired or wireless, this one right here. We've been talking about this all year, long before this pandemic and Bill Gates stepped out of the shadows to center stage. But they have been funding this technology and setting up this infrastructure for a long, long time, long before we were talking about it. Right here, artificial consciousness, artificial intelligence. And now that Epstein's out of the picture, at least publicly, Bill Gates is still working on that technology and setting up that infrastructure. That's what the creepy patent was about, that he just passed now in the midst of this pandemic.
And speaking of coercive software, Microsoft published a creepy new patent on March 26, 2020, that would use body signals such as heat or even a person's brain waves to unconsciously mine cryptocurrency, which it suggested could work while a person is watching ads. Yes, that's right, a Microsoft patent to mine crypto monitoring body signals to determine if a person has performed certain required tasks, titled Cryptocurrency System Using Body Activity Data, publication number W0/2020/060606.
Microsoft comes out with a coin, they call it Billcoin, it's proof of work. Well, now you can earn some Billcoin. If you just strap on all this stuff and you move around, you do what you're told.
Take your places, please. Right. Let's see which one of us can touch his toes. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Sensor 140 may include, for example, but not limited to, functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRIs, scanners and sensors, EEG sensors, near-infrared heart rate monitors, thermal sensors, optical sensors, radio frequency sensors, ultrasonic sensors, cameras, or any other sensor or scanner that can measure or sense body activity or scan human body.
What is the matrix? Control.
Everything that can get body anything can be attached to this particular device. For instance, the fMRI may measure body activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow.
Oh, so Bill's patent can use an fMRI, similar to the fMRI brain scan that detected the expression of the VMAT2 quote-unquote religious gene?
Here we have two brain scans. These are fMRIs. These are two different individuals with different levels of expression of VMAT2.
The fMRI may use a magnetic field and radio waves to create detailed images of the body. Example, blood flow in the brain to detect areas of activity.
And as far as talking about all of this technology leading to a new virtual reality that you can take part in and you can upload your consciousness and all of this transhumanism and high-tech stuff that we've talked about over the last couple of years, who of all people did Microsoft choose for their new virtual reality ad? Marina Abramovic. Microsoft's decadent VR ad featuring satanic artist famed for spirit cooking and pseudo-cannibalism fuels burgeoning class war.
Here, you actually can have the artist presence in your collection.
So HoloLens 2 was created by people who quite clearly have an interest in the audience forgetting that they are using technology.
And if you don't know who Marina Abramovic is and the controversy surrounding her, she's the one with all of the Podesta emails that were inviting all of these politicians to these spirit cooking rituals. Right here, this is one of her art exhibits, as they say, and she's mixed blood and sperm and breast milk, menstrual blood, all of this, and she's using it to paint with, and she's writing the recipe on the wall with it. And then the rest of the directions for the witchcraft thing is to cut yourself with a knife. And I mean, this is the type of person that Bill Gates chooses, whether you believe that she is a Luciferian or not. Out of all of the artists in the world to choose to have people join in your virtual reality, you choose someone who's mixing up menstrual blood and breast milk and telling people to cut themselves. And of course, after public outcry, they took the commercial down, but not without saying it was because of right-wing conspiracy theorists. Microsoft just pulled an ad featuring Marina Abramovic after right-wing conspiracy theorists accused her of Satanism. I mean, do you really have to be a conspiracy theorist to think that a lady rolling around with a bloody Baphomet and all of this other stuff she does might be, that any of that art might be satanic? And just for those who aren't aware, these are some of her dinners where they do this faux cannibalism. See how all these people are all cut up and stuff, but it's, you know, it's food made to look like people with mannequin heads. And then here's another one where they'll be serving the food with heads on the table, where they have people under the table, so it's actual human heads on the table. Here's one with Lady Gaga dipping in, where it looks like you're dipping, there's a dead corpse laying in it, and you dip into the sauce that is on the body and around the body. And the celebrities love it, you know. You can see them right here. So anyway, yeah, a fine role model either way that Microsoft chose as the star of their virtual reality experience. That's not the reality I want to live in, but apparently some people do. You've probably noticed since Gates' little plan has started to fall apart and we're talking about reopening the nation, and more importantly, there's been a lot of pushback on Gates taking so much power in this situation. And alternative media has really gotten the truth out. And public sentiment has swayed from everybody just thought he was this wonderful philanthropist. And now all of a sudden people are like, why is this computer programmer saying that we'll never be allowed to gather with our friends and family again? Like, who is this guy? Who elected him?
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds the WHO, the NIH, the CDC, and the UN. And now he is saying that until we get mass vaccinations, we might never be able to gather in groups.
And which activities like mass gatherings may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
But anyway, the point is, since the tide has started to turn a little bit, there's been a massive push from the CDC. You can see right here. The CDC says that a second wave could hit next winter. The CDC says the second wave this winter will likely be worse. And that's Redfield, who is coming out with all of this all of a sudden, the head of the CDC, who is funded by Gates. Now all of a sudden they're like, wait, people aren't scared to death anymore. We've got to make them more scared. And so the director of the CDC steps up to reinforce Bill Gates' agenda that no, it's going to be, no, we can never return to normal life unless we are all vaccinated and have the digital ID so we can sort out who is safe and who isn't safe. And what a lot of people don't realize about Dr. Robert Redfield is that he worked with Bill Gates extensively back during the HIV crisis in the 80s and 90s. But anyway, it was back during that era that all of these players really started working together. Fauci was working on the HIV vaccine. In fact, True Pundit broke this story that the CDC director, Redfield, was under a federal investigation for scientific fraud and misconduct because he had fabricated data in the vaccine trials during the HIV/AIDS crisis. So this isn't his first rodeo of falsifying data. And guess who his partner was, who was also under investigation for falsifying the vaccine data? Birx. So is it any wonder when we see these numbers now that they're presenting to us and we're like, but that's not at all what happened, and these aren't right. And doctors and nurses are saying they're being made to write different things on the death certificate to pad the numbers, and what's going on here and everything. Well, this is what's going on here. These people have a history of fabricating and falsifying data, especially pertaining to viruses and vaccines. Unredacted internal documents from the Department of Defense detail the probe and the scandal in the government's medical community. Redfield, as the lead on the Army's HIV/AIDS vaccine project, who was assisted by Birx. According to the DoD documents, the project was plagued by manipulation of data, inappropriate statistical analysis, and falsified data presentation in an attempt to get a faulty vaccine approved by the FDA. And here we see all the same players.
Deborah Birx is a board member for the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, which was founded by the Gates Foundation and known for millions of dollars of fraudulent misuse of funds.
And they are part of these families. It's generational. Even Birx's daughter works for Bill Gates, or at least according to her LinkedIn page. Laura Birx, Deputy Director of Strategy, Planning and Management at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Strategy and planning, all right, for old Bill Gates, you and your mama. And Seattle, Washington. Don't let it escape you that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is headquartered in Seattle, Washington. And just like we discussed at the very beginning of this video with them buying up the quarantine hotels, that was in Seattle, Washington. They were the first place to start buying up quarantine hotels. But all roads do sort of also lead to Rome because, you know, Anthony Fauci, Tony.
What do you say that for, Tony? I go away. I'm going to disappear, Tony. You'll never see me again, Tony.
And talking to leaders, talking to Tony Fauci about, okay, how do we make sure the public is seeing this in the right way?
Our next expert is Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Tony knows what to do.
Dr. Anthony S. Fauci.
Tony and I.
We turn now to Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fauci.
Who are the ones that you would point out to young Americans as figures who should inspire this country?
I think of Dr. Fauci. Probably never heard of it.
Dr. Tony Fauci, I'm the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases at NIH.
Knowing the science, does it make sense to you that some states are still not issuing stay-at-home orders? I mean, doesn't everybody have to be on the same page with this stuff?
Yeah, I think so, Anderson. I don't understand why that's not happening.
And talking to leaders, talking to Tony Fauci about, okay, how do we make sure the public is seeing this in the right way?
I go away. I'm going to disappear, Tony. You'll never see me again, Tony.
Now, obviously, I'm not saying that, oh yeah, absolutely, Anthony Fauci is Sicilian Mafia family or anything like that. There's no way that I can prove that. I don't run in their circles, but I do want to point out the circles that he does run in. I mean, just look at this. Look at the people he rubs shoulders with. Well, I mean, I guess now he can't get within, what, 6 feet of them? They bumped it up to 13 feet of them.
I don't think should ever shake hands ever again, to be honest with you.
But if they could, he would still be rubbing shoulders with the Rockefellers, George Soros, Brooke Astor, and of course, all of the media moguls who have broadcast these stories about not that he's running with the richest of the rich families since he was a young man, but no, they're all broadcasting stories about his humble beginnings.
Even as a boy, Tony was distinguished by his courage. In a neighborhood full of Brooklyn Dodgers fans, he rooted for the Yankees.
So I was in an Italian and American section called Bensonhurst.
All that sort of thing. But you can see here in this picture that this is Bill Gates Sr. So you can see Anthony Fauci had the connections to these family lines long before he started working with Bill Gates on this decade of vaccine.
Fauci, of course, being at the center of the Trump administration's virus emergency response, and a man who has personally sat on the board of at least 2 different Gates Foundation initiatives, including one titled The Decade of Vaccines.
And those of us who follow the bloodlines of the Illuminati or whatever you want to call them, we know that this is all nepotism. These are families. These are long family lines. So he has a long line of family ties, both to Big Pharma and the Sicilian family lines. This is his father's store there in New York when he was a boy. And in fact, his father was the first one in his family line born in America.
My father is first generation. His father was born in Italy, came to the United States at the turn of the 19th to 20th century.
So his family came straight from Italy. They're Sicilian. He was educated in Jesuit schools.
And he still quotes what he learned from Jesuit teaching: precision of thought, economy of expression.
So I guess some of the roads do lead to Rome, as always.
Dr. Fauci is on the Leadership Council for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In January of 2017, Anthony Fauci told a crowd at Georgetown University that there would be a surprise outbreak during the Trump presidency.
There is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
And of course, Dr. Anthony Fauci has had his fair share of federal investigations as well, going back to the AIDS vaccine research, which resurfaced during this. This video is getting way too long, so I'm not going to pull up the patent. I'll try to put the link down below in the description box. But a team of doctors in India, after this outbreak first started, isolated a protein that was patented with Dr. Fauci's name on it. Not saying that he owned the patent to it, but he was one of 4 doctors listed in the creation of this protein. And I'll go through all of that when we get to the nanotechnology virus, but it's super important when we're talking about molecular nanomachines. But for now, suffice it to say that Dr. Fauci's name is all over this thing. Then we find out that Dr. Fauci was involved in giving $3.7 million to the Wuhan lab for this exact type of research, which the United States banned. There was a moratorium against this type of research because it was so dangerous. And to make them more virulent, you know, who would want to do that? But his agency did. So he circumvented the moratorium. And Dr. Buttar talked about this quite a bit, but all of his videos on it have been deleted. Even his mirrored videos on other channels, they have tracked down and deleted. So, but you guys know it's pretty common knowledge now that it was Dr. Fauci's NIAID that gave the $3.7 million to the Wuhan lab. And I know it really upsets some Trump supporters when we start talking about his task force like Birx and Fauci. And on the other hand, it upsets the Trump haters that I won't go as far as to say Trump himself, that I'm just talking about the cabal, the crime syndicate that I can prove have worked with Bill Gates and Bill Gates' father for generations and generations. I'm not taking sides. I'm not political. I'm just talking about the cabal. For me, it's about the kingdom of God versus the kingdom of Satan. It's about Jesus Christ versus the Antichrist. So I'm just trying to keep an open mind. But I do know that Bill Gates himself, although he has high praise for Tony and for Dr. Birx and her daughter and her family, that he says himself that Donald Trump came to him in the early years of his presidency and wanted to ask Bill Gates about vaccine safety and about those allegations from India and Africa. Bill Gates himself says that Donald Trump came to him and told him that he wanted to gather a sort of task force to launch an investigation into vaccine safety. And Bill Gates told him, no, you don't want to do that. And President Trump even specifically named Robert Kennedy Jr. as one of the people that he wanted to put on this sort of council, this investigative task force. And then suddenly this. So now, you know, you can take it how you will. From what I understand, Robert Kennedy Jr. hasn't been able to get through to the White House. Is that because the advisors surrounding President Trump have something to do with that? Is that because President Trump himself is actually totally corrupt? Is it because there's an election coming up in a few months and no politician in their right mind in the middle of a worldwide pandemic could say something like, I don't believe in vaccines? So he plans on waiting until after the election? I don't know, and you don't know. Nobody knows. All I really do know is that Bill Gates did himself say that before this outbreak, President Trump had approached him at least twice wanting to launch an investigation into the safety of vaccines.
Then the second time I saw him was the March after that, so March 2017 in the White House. In both of those two meetings, he asked me if vaccines weren't a bad thing, because he was considering a commission to look into ill effects of vaccines. And somebody, his name is Robert Kennedy Jr., was advising him that vaccines were causing bad things. And I said, no, that's a dead end. That would be a bad thing. Don't do that. Robert Kennedy Jr. was advising him that vaccines were causing bad things. And I said, no, that's a dead end. That would be a bad thing. Don't do that.
The bottom line is, it doesn't matter if you are pro-Trump or you hate Trump. It doesn't matter, because clearly we are at war. It's a high-tech war. We've been talking about it for years, with directed energy weapons and weather war and these nanotechnologies and these green agendas and Agenda 21 or 2030, where they want to metropolis-style smart cities. And they're taking over with a sort of soft tyranny with this technocracy. Unelected people, a technocracy. So, and it's international. That's what Mystery Babylon is. It's an international net crime syndicate. That's why it's a mystery. It's not a nation. I know people are, oh, well, the United States is Mystery Babylon. All the nations, you can see from this lockdown, the governments of multiple nations are under the influence, whether you believe they are directly corrupt or they are being manipulated by this corrupt technocracy. It's sort of irrelevant, because this is happening now. And it's not even just all about this, about viruses or vaccines. This cabal wears many masks, whether it's the communism and the Soviet Empire or the terrorist network. They're all one thing. It's not a coincidence that at the very same time that all of this is going on, the Soviet Communist Empire, I mean Russia, and the Middle East started this oil war. And it's not a coincidence that we were already in the middle of a trade war with communist China. And it's not a coincidence that suddenly all of the protests in Hong Kong and everything had to be broken up because nobody can gather after the release of this. None of this is, there are no coincidences. This is all a script. This is all orchestrated. And whether you want to just focus on one tiny part of it and think that we're at war with China, or we're going to be at war with Russia, or whether we're at war with this cult, it really doesn't matter, so long as you know that it's time to get ready, because it's coming. This is what they have prepared for. And of course, you know, the dreams and visions going all the way back to David Wilkerson and Dietrich Dudeman and everything says that it's both. It is communist Russia and communist China, and that's all of this is part of the cabal. The invasion that's coming at our weakest moment, almost all of the visions from the Lord say the same thing. That yes, it is Russia and China, but it's also bigger than that. It's elements within our own government. It's secret elements that we call the men in black right now that just seem to appear, this mystery military force that appear to cover up these bigger, higher technology, not this kind of higher technology, but higher technology from the Nephilim races. Chimeras that aren't just, chimeric research into proteins and viruses, chimeras that are hybrid entities like you see from ancient times, in ancient Egypt and all of the ancient cultures. So even beyond all of this on the surface that we're seeing, there's another military force that we haven't even seen yet. These men in black, these super soldiers, part of the Black Awakening, and they're coming. It's coming. So please recognize this is about a lot more than a virus. The New World Order, the fact that you could wake up one day in a new world, it's real. It's not a conspiracy theory. It never has been. And these aren't isolated events. The weather wars and the hurricanes and the wildfires and every single event that happens when the legislation is rolled out. And then now the biggest operation that has ever happened, a worldwide operation that showed they can do an overnight shutdown of almost all the governments of the world, and the people went in their homes and shut up. So I think their social experiment is clear. They're ready, or they think we're ready to lay down and take it. And it doesn't matter if you believe this is a real virus. Yes, this could be horrible. Nanotechnology, transhumanism, awful. The worst virus that we have ever seen. Like the video I showed you from the Department of Defense back in 2005. This could be the absolute monstrous worst thing that could happen to humanity, akin to a chemical lobotomy delivered through a flu virus. So it doesn't matter if you believe this is really a virus or that there is no virus. We need to quit bickering with each other about whether Trump's a good guy or a bad guy, and whether this is a virus or it's not a virus. It's not even about that. Look at the bigger picture, the infrastructure. This is happening now. If it doesn't come this way, it's coming another way, but it is coming. The Holy Bible says the battle of Armageddon is coming. There is going to be a face-off between the forces of evil in all of these dimensions and the forces of good. And the Bible's clear. The only one powerful enough to defeat the Luciferian body is Jesus Christ. And he is coming. He is coming. Yes, the enemy has shown us their cards now. They've stepped out of the shadows and the door is clicked behind them. We know now. But the Bible says in 2 Thessalonians 2:8, and then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will overthrow with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the splendor of his coming. Jesus Christ is coming. Everything that we have warned about is happening now. And yes, it looks like we're going to have a small window of opportunity, so use it. Use it, because they are clear the second wave is coming. They have not stopped building the infrastructure. They are pushing forward at mad rates. So now is the time to get right with God. That's your number one prep. Get your heart right with God. If you have been playing church, maybe you've never received the Holy Spirit. Maybe your church told you that the Holy Spirit they blasphemed the Holy Spirit, which the Bible says is the only unforgivable sin. Maybe they've told you, that was something for ancient times, for the apostles, but not for you. Well, now is your time to receive the Holy Spirit and step out of empty religion and rituals and ceremony and all of this churchianity and become a true follower and servant of the Lord Jesus Christ. That is your only salvation. Our only hope in this situation. They are so thorough, and this is so diabolical, and they are so merciless that your only hope is salvation through Jesus Christ. You are going to need a Savior. You are not going to be able to save yourself from this. You need a Savior. Because just like Psalm 91 says, that is going to be the only safe place. You're not going to be able to bug out to a safe place. There isn't going to be any place that's safe besides in the refuge of the Most High God. Psalm 91, he who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress. He is my God. I will trust in him. Surely he shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the perilous pestilence. He shall cover you, and under his wings you shall take refuge. His truth shall be your shield and your buckler. You shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day, nor of the pestilence that walks in the darkness, nor of the destruction that lays waste at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes shall you look and see the reward of the wicked, because you have made the Lord, who is my refuge, even the Most High, your dwelling place. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. And this is what the Lord says, because he has set his love upon me, therefore I will deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. Now is the time, you guys. Repent. This isn't the time to be playing church. Now is the time. Repent. Get right with God. He is our only hope. I love you. God bless you and your families.